Is there anybody that needs to be admitted? Okay. Okay, if you can join me in the sign of our faith, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We come together in hope from different community groups, answering the same call to service, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in gratitude for the trust placed in us, for the opportunity to serve, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in respect, aware of our diversity, willing to work for the good, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in awe of the wonder and beauty of each of God's children, pieces of the same puzzle. We come together in God's name, and as we work together toward the same goal, each piece of the puzzle begins to fit neatly into place, creating a breathtaking picture of love, compassion, courage, and grace. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Okay, I'm just looking for notes. Let me just get my chat up here so I don't miss anybody's hands up. Okay. Okay, so 1.2, approval of the agenda. Does everybody have the agenda in front of them? Was there any questions, additions, deletions, comments? Okay, if not, could I get a motion? Could I get a motion to approve the agenda? And feel free to put your mic on for this one and just jump in.
I'll move that, Brenda. It's Maria.
Okay, thanks, Maria. Can I get it seconded?
Rhonda, second.
Okay, thanks, Rhonda. Okay. Oh, sorry, I'm admitting people in to the meeting. Welcome, Andrea, Dan, Michelle. Okay, we are going to jump right into our presentations. Do we have Aaron on the line?
Hi, Brenda. Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Aaron, how are you?
I am well. How are you?
Good, good. All right, I am going to mute and turn it over to you to take us through the financial review. If anybody has any questions, do you want them saved to the end, Aaron? Is that easier?
You can put the hand up throughout. I think that might be fine too, Brenda. If it's easier for everyone, I'm good with that.
Okay, I'll keep my eye on the chat box.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
I'm trying to share the screen here. Can everyone see the presentation? Let's try that again.
We can see it, Aaron.
Yep.
Thank you, Adam. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us here. I'm Aaron Lofts. I'm the Superintendent of Business Services. On the line with me, I have Adam Cross. He's our Senior Manager of Financial Services. I wish I had more information for everybody. Right now, we're still waiting for the GSNs. So what's the GSNs? The GSNs is our primary funding mechanism for school boards. To put in perspective, our budget's about, at least this year, about 430 million or so, and the GSNs are about 373 million of all of our revenue. We usually get our GSNs in March. Last year, we were a little late. We didn't get them till April. This year, we still haven't received the GSNs. So unfortunately, unlike other years where we kind of bring you an idea of where we're going to be with the budget and such and a little bit more concrete funding information, we unfortunately don't have that this year. So what we thought we would do was kind of present where we are, what we do know right now, and kind of go through what we saw at revised estimates. So revised estimates, just so everyone knows what revised estimates are. In June, we usually typically in a normal year, we pass our budget for the upcoming school year. Then in December the following year, we look at our enrollment again, we look at all our funding again, we go through and we do what's called a revised estimate or a revised budget, which we bring the board in typically in December. So normally this group doesn't necessarily see the revised budget, they only see the original budget. So we're going to kind of walk through some of the revised budget numbers along with some of the additional funding that may have came out or positions that may have come out as a result of the collective agreements that were settled throughout the year. So let me just, there we go. So here's what we're going to look at, presentation overview. We're going to look at our estimated enrollment for the upcoming year, budget consultation survey, which was sent out back in February.
Aaron?
Yep.
I'm so sorry. Can I just pause for a second? I just have a hand up needing clarification. So I wanted to address that before you moved on.
Yep.
Maria, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, hi, sorry. I just want to understand what we're looking at because I understood the purpose of today's presentation was to give us an update on the financial, a financial review. So to review the financial statements as they relate to spec ed. So meaning the current year, not budget.
Well, we do
So
have
are
that
we
as
looking at-
well.
Sorry?
Well, we are going to go through that as well. We have that in this as well, but we thought we'd be focusing on the additional positions that were added, items like that. But we do have an update on the overall board spec ed position as of the end of May.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Erin.
Thank you. So let me just get right into it. So the enrollment. So as everyone, I don't know if everyone knows this or not, but our majority of our funding is tied to enrollment. So you can see over the last 10 years or so, we've had a pretty steady increase in enrollment, and we're forecasting the same for next year, 2020, 2021. Now, with everything going on with COVID and such, we may have some changes as a result to our enrollment, but as of right now, we are forecasting another increase in enrollment for the upcoming school year. So the consultation, so we did the consultation back in May, and the results were provided to board in March. Now you can see the top few there. What the result of the consultation was increase in social workers and mental health workers in schools, prioritize early intervention for strategies and programs, and increase child and youth counselors and staffing. So those were the main areas, in addition to SLP as well, which came out of the consultation survey. So the budget challenges for the upcoming year. So as I mentioned earlier, the GSNs are not known as of yet, but we also have some expense uncertainties as well. So the result of the COVID pandemic that we're currently in, there's going to be an increase in supply costs, or sorry, in cleaning costs and cleaning material costs for the schools. Technology, we've seen an increase in our technology costs as a result of distance learning, hardware, software, some internet access for parents and families that don't have access to the internet. That's something we've looked at as well this last few weeks or so, last few months. We're also going to see potentially an increase in transportation costs. Now, the province is still deciding what the fall will look like. Having said that, we know there will be an additional cost to the board relating to the cleaning of the buses and disinfecting buses at the end of each day. And also there's going to be some uncertainty with respect to the supply chain, putting our orders in for the fall. We've already seen some of that already, what we're dealing with currently. So we all know, we've said this before, we have a shortfall in our special education funding. As a result of revised estimates, we're looking at about a $3.2 million shortfall in our funding. Having said that, there were some collective agreements that settled throughout the year. One of them was for CUPE, and CUPE represents our educational assistants, or our EAs. So as a result of the collective agreement with the CUPE, we've actually hired 13.5 additional EAs for this current year. They've started in the second half of this year, so January, February or so. So we have already added that for this current school year. There's also additional funding for spec ed, STEM, mental health and such for the 2020-2021 year, but that's more on the teaching side of things. We also have additional funding for next year for APSP, for positions such as speech language pathologists or psych workers. So these will be some things that will be coming up in the upcoming year. So from here, I'm just going to hand it over to Adam. He's kind of going to look at the revised estimates, revenues, and then as well as where we are as of the end of May. Adam, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so I'll roll through this. I'll scroll through it for you, Adam.
Okay. Can you go to? So this slide just outlines the main components of the special education grant. There are essentially 5 main components. The 2 primary ones being the special education per pupil amount and the differentiated special education needs amount. And the next few slides will kind of go over at revised estimates what the revenue looked for each one of these components for 2019-20. An important thing to note is that when it comes to the special education grant, it can only be used for special education expenditures. So what that means is in any given year, if we don't spend our full allotment of funding, we have to defer or kind of put it aside to be spent in future years on special education needs. Next slide, please. So this slide outlines four of the areas of the funding for 2019-20. You can see there that our special education per pupil amount equated to 27.7 million, and our other section that is key is our differentiated special education needs, which is down kind of midway through that slide at 17.3 million. And we showed kind of our enrollment, which calculates the per pupil amount, as well as the special education equipment amount. So there's two kind of funding streams for the special education equipment amount. There's a per pupil amount and a claims-based amount. Next slide, please. On this slide, it outlines our funding for behavioral expertise. So again, there's two components to that. There's a per pupil amount for behavioral professionals, and then there's a per pupil amount for training with respect to behavioral analysis. And then the last sort of section there is our special education equipment amount. So that's when we talk about our deferred, so the opening balance, so that's what was left unspent from prior years funding with respect to the special education equipment, our current year allocation, and then the amounts we're projecting to spend in 2019-20, resulting in a smaller carry forward going into 2021. From an expenses side, the primary expenses for special education relate to salaries and benefits, both of the teacher salaries as well as the educational assistants salaries and benefits. So you'll see there the 17.7 for teachers and the 25.3 for educational assistants, excuse me. So that represents essentially 96% of the expenses for special education within our board. There's also not 9 million in expenses related to professionals and other paraprofessional salaries and benefits. And other expenditures of 2.25 million, which essentially covers everything else from textbooks to classroom materials, supplies, equipment, and training workshops. So for a total of 55 million. And that's where the deficit comes that Aaron alluded to before. So if you look back, we had 52 million when it came to our revenue, and then 55 million when it comes to our expenses. Also to point out, in our transportation costs, there's roughly 1.98 million with respect to special education needs. And again, here's sort of the projected shortfall for 2019-20. So here's where our special education expenditures stand as of May 31st, so 9 months into this fiscal year. You'll see that the total expenditures to date are 42.9 million, or roughly 77.8% of our budget, which is in line with the prior year's spent expenses at this point, which was 79.7% of the budget. You will notice when you're looking at this slide that there are some lower values, because typically at the 9-month period, we're looking in a range of, or an expectation of 75 to 90% of our expenses are incurred. So we're within that range in total, but you'll notice within some of the lines, for example, workshops, were significantly lower than that 75 to 90% range. And this is partially due to the timing. So a lot of times our training happens at the back end of the year, but also the impact of the COVID pandemic has sort of slowed down some of the typical needs or spending when it comes to classroom materials and supplies and computer equipment and so forth. So you'll see some lower values here on this slide for some of those costs. Now, salaries and benefits have remained kind of in line with where we would expect because our employees continue to get paid during the pandemic. So I'll open it up to any questions that members of the committee may have at this point.
Great, thanks, Adam. Is there any questions? Maria, was that your hand up from before, or is it up now?
Hello?
Hello?
Hi, sorry, I seem to be having some difficulty here.
That's okay. Was that your hand up again?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
yes, it was.
Okay, go ahead.
So I just want to clarify, so this report that's on the screen right now, these are our actuals to May 31st, is that correct?
Yes, when you look in the column that says 2019-20 expenses and commitments at May 31, 2020. So in the second kind of box, the first column.
Okay. I find this very confusing, and I know this seems to be kind of the way it's done at the board, but as an accountant myself, to me, a budget report is a budget, right? It's what's done at the beginning of the period to project out, not actual. So I just find that title confusing. But also, I can't read this report. It's blurry. It's tiny. It's really hard to review it at all. And I just want to say it would be really helpful to get this in advance so that we could have it. This is a lot to digest, even if we could read it. So I'm going to ask if we can receive this after the meeting and have an opportunity to submit questions once we've had a chance to actually be able to read it.
Sure, for the time being, do you want to, Andrea, are you able to just expand that a little bit? Or whoever, no, you're not sharing it. Aaron, perfect. Maybe not. It's like a fine balance. But yeah, that's no problem sharing it after.
And I guess I just want to make a comment. I know I made this comment before, but I think it's important to reiterate that it's not uncommon for the spec ed budget to be in a deficit. I think that's something that boards across the province find. I think there's been a lot of people have asked for a review of the funding formula for spec ed. Doesn't really make sense to me, and I don't think I'm the only one. And I think even in the ministry's documents, they talk about using the GSN to kind of supplement those shortfalls. So they even kind of recognize that it's not sufficient, which makes it tricky because, what is the right number that should be being spent, right? It's not necessarily what they're funding and how much of the GSN. But I guess I just want to say that being in a deficit doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem here. Anyway, I just want to make that comment.
Aaron, do you want to comment on that?
There is some truth to what Ms. Lorenko just mentioned. There's other funding areas too that we've historically been in a deficit in spec ed. I don't think anyone around this table is surprised to see that. There are other funding areas that we try to allocate, but like Ms. Lorenko mentioned, it's difficult to do with the current funding model that's in place. All we can do is report on what the ministry suggests to report on. This format that you see in front of you is actually a ministry template that we've used for the spec ed side of it. So that's where this comes from. It's different than the private sector, the way that budgeting is typically done on a month-to-month basis. This is more how the ministry has suggested that we explain to trustees how our quarterly reports go and how our budgeting goes. So that's where this report came from. With respect to the funding model itself, I really don't have much further to go on other than what's been mentioned already. Other than some of the data from this does come from StatsCan data as well. So some of our funding is related to StatsCan data, which also would impact what we actually receive in our board due to the jurisdiction that we live in.
Sorry, I don't know if there's anyone ahead of me, but can you elaborate on that StatsCan piece?
I'm not sure how much more I can. I know we've talked about this before as well. StatsCan, there's different parameters that are included in the calculation in the GSNs. Some of that data does come directly from StatsCan, and behind the scenes, there's a calculation that's that the ministry performs based on that data. We aren't privy to what exactly the data they're taking, but it definitely is coming from StatsCan.
And just sort of to add some further context to that, so that information is used in that differentiated special education needs amount. So that's 17 million that we talked about earlier in the presentation. That's where sort of the statistical modeling comes in, where it pulls in information on median income, unemployment, and things like that. And there's 6 kind of components in it. There is that might be helpful for the committee members. There is a memo that the ministry releases with respect to federal education funding each year, and it kind of outlines a bit more in depth on what each one of these items is. It doesn't specifically go into how much our school board will receive, but it talks about the total funding that they've kind of earmarked for those sections. So if that's something that the committee would be interested in, we can certainly circulate that memo as well as the presentation.
Yeah, that would be great. And I have read those descriptions before, and there's some very complicated statistical models and things based on postal codes, if that's what you're referring to. And I guess my point is, and I'm not the only one to have raised this, like where's the logic in that because a certain postal code you're funded a certain way, but yet we're still not funded the same as the public board. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, some of this came out in an auditor's general report about, why, like that aspect as well as other aspects of the funding model. So I know this isn't a board thing. It's some of it's coming. I understand what you're saying, coming from the ministry. But yeah, so how do you determine what really you're, how close to the budget you should be with the way that the funding is determined? It's not logical to me, and
yeah,
and I think you know what you're saying.
Well, pardon me.
Sorry, I think I hope you kind of know where I'm coming from. In terms of it just doesn't the funding formula doesn't make logical sense in a lot of ways, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I know it's not coming from the board, it's coming from the ministry, but I just wanted to make that comment. So, and I think that makes it difficult to know how close to your budgeted number you should be in terms of what you're spending. I mean, it's not based on nothing is based on how many spec ed students we have in the board. It's based on total enrollment. Right there, that's kind of an illogical thing.
And the StatsCan data, like you said, on postal codes and
right,
and all that. Those 2 components make it up. You're correct. I don't really have. I wish I had a better.
I hear you.
Yeah. Even like Adam said, like you've seen it too, Mr. Wrinkle, that like it's a complicated formula that's pulling information that we don't have all the access to as well. So that actually adds another wrinkle to it. So even when we calculate it manually, which is what we do, we take all the inputs and calculate out our revenue manually using Excel. On the spec ed side, some of those items we have to take what the ministry has provided us for a lump sum amount that are actually in the tables in the regulation each year that's published for the GSNs. So even for us to manually calculate those numbers, unfortunately, we can't even do that because we're relying on what the ministry provides in those situations.
Yeah. I feel it shouldn't be that complicated, but again, I know that's beyond this group here, but just putting it out there. Maybe that's another letter we can write to the ministry. Anyway.
No, thanks.
But the one thing to kind of highlight is when we say that we're in a deficit, that's the board's commitment to kind of covering off that gap with our GSN. So when we have 55 million in expenses and only 52 million in revenue, we're covering that additional 3.2 million through our GSN. So that's the commitment that we've made as a school board in our greater budget to make sure that we're trying to address some of these needs as best we can. Obviously, we can't accommodate everything within our current funding model, but that's a way to look at this. So yes, there is a deficit in the funding, but we're still willing to, as a board, to spend extra money to make sure that our students are getting the needs that are in help that we can provide.
Thank you.
Was there any other questions? And Maria, I agree with you. You know, and it's not specific to this, but you know, we've had conversations even amongst some of the trustees as far as you know, the funding formulas and the model and the you know, the amounts that were funded for. So, you know, definitely needs some work, in my opinion, from an advocacy perspective there, and what that looks like from a board perspective. I don't know. I know how I feel personally, but I don't think there's any harm. And, you know, again, we had some fun writing that letter for Maxi. So,
Yeah.
you know, I don't ever, you know, I never have a problem firing off something to sort of state a position. So, you know, if that's something we want to take a look at, I'd be happy to do that.
And I certainly have no problem writing letters when I want to comment on a position either. But you know, and I'm thinking, like, how much time does the ministry spend coming up with these complicated calculations, right? Like, why aren't we just funded on how many spec ed students we have, and maybe what the exceptionalities are? Like, you know, again, it's not a conversation that's going to be solved here or even at the board table. It's a bigger conversation than that, but it's definitely seems illogical. So
Yeah.
guess we can, yeah. So, anyway.
Was there any, so I think there'll be some clarity probably for some people if they're able to see this and digest this. You know, and I know, I mean, Aaron, I see this year over year, and I still need to get out my magnifying glass and my highlighter. You know, and this isn't my first rodeo. So,
Yeah.
you know, I definitely, you know, I definitely think it's worth sharing, and let's see if people have, you know, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, definitely.
Great. We can, you know, we can either do a compilation where everyone can send, you know, questions into myself, and I can put them all together so that you get one big email, or we can figure out how to get the questions over to you, because then I think it would be great to share those answers with people.
And you're right. I can see when I'm looking at the screen too. I'm sure it is pretty small. I tried to make it look a little larger right now, but you're right. It is tiny numbers, unfortunately. Okay.
Well, and it, you know, it's small, but it's also just processing the information and understanding, you know, what's contained within each of those areas, and just having time to work through that. So, you know, maybe what we'll do is I'll make a suggestion to our SEAC members that everyone can send in questions by a certain date. We'll put those in a format, send it over to you, and then you can, you and your team can maybe answer and flip that back to us.
Sure.
I think that would be helpful. Does anybody have any other I mean, I know this isn't what we were hoping for. Trust me, speaking also as a trustee, I'd like this information from the ministry. I know this is, you know, we were hoping to have had a more fulsome discussion with actual numbers at this point, and unfortunately we don't have that information here. But does anybody have any other
I think Rhonda has a question.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I don't know why.
Rhonda, that I missed that. Go ahead. It didn't show up in my.
It won't, Brenda. It won't allow me to raise my hand. I don't know why. That's why I
Okay.
went on screen. Anyways,
Yeah.
Brendan mentioned about the idea of funding based on the spec ed students more directly. And that was an old funding model we used to have. I'm sure some people in Oliver would have information, the ISA model. And it was a nightmare for school boards. It took up all of the resources, the human resources, doing the assessments and determining what student would. It just didn't work. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't go back to that and maybe modify it, but I'm just saying there's some history to what Brenda said. And it was a model that was used for over a decade, and it was a nightmare for boards. And that's why they went to this particular model. I don't even forget the wording they use for this model. But anyways, that's just so you know, that did happen, Brenda, and it existed, and it just didn't work.
I think that was actually Maria's, but that's okay.
Did I say, I kept saying Brenda, didn't I?
That's okay.
I meant Maria.
That's okay. The comment is, it doesn't matter. It's good.
You get what I'm saying. Okay.
One thing I can think of as a result of that model is that your child would have to be identified in order to be a spec ed student, and that would mean testing.
And not just that, I was one of those people who did that testing, and I'm going to share with you as well, Erin, and everybody else. We actually had to make students, this is incredible, look worse on paper to get the funding that they needed. We had to show emotional issues. It was really crazy time in the funding time for education. So I don't know what the answer is here, because I agree with everyone that this is crazy based on postal codes. And I remember hearing that back in the day when they said this is how the new funding model was going to be designed. I was like, what? Didn't make sense at all, and it doesn't make sense. So yeah, I don't have the answers, but I just wanted to speak about the history around that direct funding based on spec ed students. And you're right, it did take up all the psych testing time. So that's all we did for 5 years, was play catch up and try and get the stats for the board. Anyways, just sharing.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Yeah.
Maria, I see your hand up again. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I mean, yeah, listening to it's good to know the history, which I didn't really have that history. I think when I joined SEAC, they were starting to move to the new model. So maybe not exactly what we had before. And I guess it would be good to have a model that's not just identified students, but students that are receiving spec ed services, because we know that number's increasing. I guess just something that's more, I'm trying to find my my accounting word here, but something that's more of a direct correlation to what drives our costs, right? That's normally how you would budget, is what drives your costs.
Staffing is our main driver of cost for us. It's the main cost that we have, our EAs and certs and such are what our main cost is for spec ed budget.
But your staffing is based on your students' receipt, like it sort of originates from students, right? So I'm thinking the funding should somehow, maybe not exactly how it was done before, but somehow be tied to the students that need to receive services, because that's what's going to drive your staffing and your other costs. So again, a bigger conversation, but just wanted to comment on that.
Oh, it's a good conversation, though.
Did anybody have any other questions for Aaron while we have him here with respect to the budget?
I did forward a PDF of a copy of it to Andrea, so she has a copy that she can share. So, so everyone can get a copy of that. It's just a PDF of exactly what we have here.
That's awesome, Aaron. And like I said, I'll do a follow-up with our group, and we'll do a question compilation and send that off to you. And that would be super helpful, just in, as Maria said, in case someone's not able to process, this that quickly, what's there. And again, recognizing that we don't have, unfortunately, all the information that we would be hoping to have at this point. But yeah, that'd be great. We appreciate that.
And I think, Ms. Lorenko, I think you saw the last slide, and I think that's what you were at least alluding to initially, was the actuals as of this date. So took us a while to get to it, but we got to it. We just wanted to go through the first part just to show the funding mechanism and how we anticipate, because as you know, we don't know what our final enrollment is for the calculation yet. We won't do that till the fall. So all we would have would be the actual expenses to date. The revenues would still be the estimates based on the revised. So, and again, I'm throwing out terms and I apologize to everybody. I might be throwing out terms that are second nature to us, but really aren't second nature when you see this, like Brenda said, once a year. So I apologize for that if I sometimes go too quickly through some of the funding and such.
That's okay. We'll attach we'll attach an acronym list next time, Aaron.
I don't have to catch myself all the time.
Yeah, okay. So if there's no other questions, for now, you've sent that off. We can give people time to process it. And yeah, I'll move to 2.2. Is everybody good? Yeah, thumbs up.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Aaron.
Have a good night.
All right, thanks. Take care.
All right.
Thanks, Aaron.
Okay, so we are moving to presentation 2.2, which is the school-based rehabilitation services update. Oh, and there's Denise Colley on my screen. So Denise is going to take us through that for people that weren't aware or have heard it mentioned before. There's a change with respect to how school-based services will be provided. So Denise, I welcome this update.
Okay, I'm just going to back it up. So this slide presentation was provided to us by Aaron Oak kids to outline their vision around school-based rehab services as of September 2020. This is the agenda of the slideshow, but we're going to move through it fairly quickly. So feel free to stop me if you have any questions. So the current state is that as of January 2019, the school-based rehab services transferred from the LHINs, the local health integration networks, over to Aaron Oak Kids. And for the past year, the Aaron Oak Kids have really been the contract administrators. So they've maintained the third-party providers and they haven't changed the service model. And that was the direction of the ministry, that no changes were to happen until 2020. So beginning in September, Aaron Oak Kids will be providing school-based rehab services with therapists who are employed by Aaron Oak. The therapists are going to be assigned a geographic caseload of schools to visit on a regular basis. We have been told that as much as possible, we will have therapists that are dedicated to Halton Catholic District School Board. We may have to share some physical therapists with Halton District. Just because there's such a limited number of students on those caseloads. The occupational therapy is going to be delivered based on a tier model of intervention in elementary schools. The French school boards have middle schools, so that's why it refers to middle schools. And the physical and speech therapy are going to continue with a traditional caseload model. The vision is that children with complex needs will have one therapy team for homeschool in the community. So they will have one physical therapist, one occupational therapist, and one speech therapist that would provide those services across environments, and that children and families will have a seamless service experience from entry into service until school exit. These are their guiding principles. That children have to be in publicly funded schools, and that the purpose of the services really are to support a child's access to be able to participate in curriculum, that obviously parents have to consent, and that service plans will be created in collaboration with the school staff who know the student and who are obviously supporting them every day. Students entering JK or students entering junior kindergarten who've received preschool services in either OT, PT, or speech from Aaron Oak will be seamlessly transitioned. So that means that they won't wait again. The ideal scenario is that they go directly onto the therapist caseload of the person who's providing services in the school that they're starting at. So that's really to get rid of the idea that they're going to wait again in order to access anything. The school-based rehab therapists will assess and determine the service stream or the tier of service that preschool student will enter into when they start JK. And those services can include consultation, therapy blocks, or home practice. So the home practice would be that the child would be given a home program. Discharge would occur at the end of the number of sessions that that child is allotted, or once the therapy goals are met. If there's outstanding needs, then they can be re-referred and placed on the wait list. So the school-based rehab service referrals are mostly for children with moderate to severe needs. Students with mild needs mild needs in OT will be met by universal design that the OT will be given in their tiered intervention model to schools. The exception will be students who have fluency or motor speech, because really there's no mild fluency or motor speech, and those students will be eligible for services. And the schools will receive an ongoing update of the students who are active and who are on the wait list in September, January, and June of every school year. So the biggest change in terms of the service delivery model is to occupational therapy. The tiered model was pioneered in Partnering for Change. And a variation of that model that was studied and researched has been in place in some elementary schools in some different areas, including 10 schools in Burlington in the Halton District School Board. And Erin Oak is going to extend that model to the entire catchment area for both elementary and middle schools that are in the French Board. The team will include an occupational therapist and a therapy assistant, so an occupational therapy assistant OTA. The frequency of service, so that's the number of times or how long that OT is at a school within a month, is going to be determined by both the size of the school and the number of students that are identified requiring OT support. We haven't been given those numbers yet. We were told the minimum would be a half a day a month. So I don't think I have to explain tiered models of service to you. You're very familiar with it because we use it at our board all the time. The base of the pyramid is universal design, the middle is intervention, and the top is specialized services. And you can see when you look at the general literature around tiered intervention, not just as it relates to occupational therapy, but the best guess is that 80% of needs are met by classroom-based intervention and universal design, and then fewer and fewer students need the more intense services as you move up the pyramid. So the idea for the universal design for the OTs is that they would work with classroom teachers within the context of the classroom and provide evidence-informed strategies and suggestions. So these are things that would benefit all children. How exactly they're going to do this, we haven't landed on yet. I would imagine there'll be sort of a combination of information being pushed out to teachers as well as possible lunch and learns or PD. The impact of what schools will look like in September obviously is going to influence how this is delivered at a tier 1 level. And that's just talking about that most of the students, they're anticipating that they will have their needs met through universal design. Another 10 to 15% may need some specific strategies or specific assessment by the occupational therapist to determine what's appropriate, and then some intervention that can either be small group or individualized. And my best guess is that much of that intervention would be mediated by the occupational therapy assistant. And then tier 3 is for the children who have more complex needs. OT in secondary schools is going to be provided using a traditional caseload model, which means that the school would initiate a referral and then the student would be placed on a wait list. We're not entirely sure how many visits that will include in secondary, so we'll wait to see what they say in September. Physiotherapy will continue to be consultation for equipment. They're anticipating that the physiotherapist will provide a wraparound of service for out-of-school needs as well, and that the PTs may access therapy assistants to provide short to develop schools that, again, are required to access school programming. So those might be some skills that are identified jointly between the physical therapist and the school team. So the transition year for OT and PT is that students entering JK with complex needs will have the equipment transition to the school-based rehab service team. So there's approximately 65 to 80 students who have equipment who will be transitioned over onto the SBRS therapist caseload. Students do not have equipment needs, but can be referred if a need arises within the school environment. Speech therapy. So again, the speech therapists from Roanoke will do the articulation, the motor speech, the fluency, and the voice therapy. That will continue to be a caseload model, and the referral will be initiated by the SLP at the school board. They will continue to see moderate to severe artic and not mild. Services may include home programming, group intervention, individual intervention. So some students may get home programming as their primary means of intervention. The new preschool speech and language eligibility. So this has changed. So students currently can be referred up to August 31st prior to JK entry, and that's going to change in that they'll only accept referrals up till June 30th moving forward. This year will be an exception, but moving forward after this year, parents will have up until June 30th to refer to preschool. And then students who are not accessing school-based rehab services, so do not have articulation needs, will have an assessment and a transition report prior to entry into kindergarten. So they will be discharged from the preschool speech and language caseload as of the end of August, and they will be transitioned to the school-based rehab service provider only if they have articulation needs. So for now, they're going to honor the cutoff date of August 31st, but again, 2021, it'll be June 30th. Students for this year who have a date of birth in 2016 will be held until December 31st, 2020. Anybody with a 2015 birth date will be discharged August 31st, and then moving forward, all students will be discharged August 31st, 2021. So all students will be discharged prior to JK. So currently, right now, they discharge them after the JK year. So they're discharged August 31st prior to SK. So they will be discharging a year earlier. Students with complex motor speech needs will go directly onto the school-based rehab services caseload. Other needs that are more moderate will be placed on a wait list. And they will be placed on a wait list based on their preschool speech and language referral date. So they will have a little bit of an edge over students who are referred from the school. This is just speaking to the fact that the expectation is that there's collaboration between the board SLP and the school-based rehab SLP, and that's something that really is mandated by our college. And we will figure out, how that looks as we've always done. Therapy assistants are going to be added, which will be new from a school-based rehab service model, but is very familiar with students for Halton Catholic because we've had CDAs for a number of years. The referral forms, there's going to be one form. They're supposed to make it easier. We've had a lot of input. We've asked them several times to revise the form. I think we've got a good form moving forward now. I think it'll make it easier for schools. And right now we're allowed to submit them electronically, and we're hoping that that continues moving forward into September 2020. Roanoke obviously is eager to engage with families and encouraging active family participation through their portal to receive treatment notes. Parents would have to register for the portal, so there is a hope that parents will do so that they can access some of the online supports that Roanoke has. So the next steps is that we will be given some letters and forms that we will be, forwarding out to our schools and to our parents, and information sheets. Schools will get the wait lists and the active student lists for September. And as well, we've been invited to provide a presentation in August to the new staff who will be assigned to Halton Catholic so that we can orient them to our board and some of our processes. And that's the presentation. Are there any questions?
So I have a million questions, as you can imagine.
I know you do.
But I'm gonna,
I know you do.
and I'm writing them down furiously, and I was trying to not pace my hallway. But Marika, why don't I let you have your hand up? Why don't you go ahead and start?
Yeah, I also need to process
My hand was cramping.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, you just briefly talked about high school and the referral process for OT for high school students. Can you just expand on that a little bit, and also just let us know where we're at with the wait list for that? What does that look like? And you could just expand on that.
Sure. So the referral process to high school will be the exact same as it is now, basically, is that the school can initiate a referral for OT support, and that referral will be received by Erin Oak and will be placed onto the wait list. The thinking is that the wait list will be eliminated in the elementary schools because of the tiered intervention model for OT. So what that means for the waitlist in secondary, I'm not entirely sure, and we haven't been told if the secondary schools will get a certain allotment of time every month as well. They have a rubric that they're running in terms of staffing assignments right now, and we expect to have that information probably in July, they've said. So what the wait time will be for OT, you know what, it's hard to say. I'm not privy to their entire wait list right now, but I know that their goal, and they're going to do their very best to try and get those wait times down to as short a time as they can. They've also said that they are absolutely open to the school board having conversations about who we would prioritize within our system. So if there's a child with an urgent need, say they're new to our board and they can't come to school until we have certain information around equipment that is needed, then they will prioritize them on the list.
So do you have an idea of how long the wait list is right now?
For OT, I think it's about a year. Let me just check my notes.
Ow. Can you put in the?
I know the speech.
Ow.
I know the speech is 3 years.
No way.
And I know OT wasn't as bad as that.
I'm going to need some wine before I ask questions.
Yeah, I'm going to need a gin and tonic. Okay.
I got you, Rhonda.
Okay, thank you.
I think Rhonda's got her hand up.
Yeah, she's jumping out of her screen at me. Just 1 second. Marika, are you good if I move on to Rhonda?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we can always circle back.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Rhonda.
So I just hope, Denise, you don't feel like we're jumping on you, because that's not the
I'm just a
intent.
messenger. I know that. Don't
I
worry.
know.
I'm taking notes, and I will absolutely give your feedback to Erin Oak.
Okay, so I heard about this through the grapevine, and I work for ASCII, which is the Affiliated Service for Children and Youth, which is the equivalent to Erin Oak west of here, right? Hamilton over to the Niagara area. Yeah. And they are not discharging their students, the PLS students, in the JK year. And I did hear about this change with Erin Oak. Do you have any insight as to why? Because I know our families are so happy to receive that service during that year. It makes them feel supported, and it's a smoother transition for the kids. So
right, because they're doing that with as part of the infant hearing program as well, right? They're just charging them a year earlier.
Yeah.
So why they are doing it is they say the mandate was always up until school entry. And the challenge is the preschool speech and language program came in the late 90s, before we had JK. So school entry at that point was, 5 years old, because there was no JK year. Once JK came in, some CTCs opted at that point to discontinue seeing JKs, and some opted to continue to see them, and Erin Oak continued to see them. And now what they're saying is that they're going to, I guess, go back to the original mandate, which was to school entry. So certainly I would be, the reality is, I think that they're doing their best to manage the demand for their services and the wait lists, but they're certainly not changing their funding to reflect the fact that we're taking on JK, and they're not. But yeah, so that's the rationale. What I can tell you is there's good precedent around the province for them to do this. Many CTCs have been doing this for years, and several have not, but many have. So it's not something that I think we're going to be able to change, but I do think that we're going to be able to figure out a way at our board to support the children that need support, regardless of what age they are.
Thank you.
All right, Denise, you ready for me?
I'm ready. Go.
All right, I got a couple. I'm trying to scratch things out as we go through. Okay, so these will be in no particular order.
Okay.
You know, theoretically, and you and I have talked about this at great length, so this isn't a surprise. And I think, you know, when we're looking at younger children in this transition piece and the change over to Erin Oak, it's not going to be as huge, I don't think, of a transition, because a lot of these kids are potentially already receiving services at Erin Oak. So, you know, that wraparound, that continuation will work for them. My concern comes where we have children who so Erin Oak typically in the past is discharged at 6 years old, right? For children off of OT, PT, SLP, all of that sort of thing. They may just hang on for consultative only. They may go for rehab after surgery, or they may be hooked up with ADRS. But typically they're discharged right at 6 years old. And so they don't have that active, they don't have those relationships. So I look at a child who has been consistent, let's say with an OT through St. Elizabeth, or a PT through St. Elizabeth, or even a speech path through there. They know the students. What is this going to look like from a transition perspective for those students who have zero relationship with Erin Oak? They don't have a PT or OT who knows them. They don't have an SLP who knows them. They may have kids at our board who they actually haven't laid eyes on in years. Because even when you go for a seating clinic assessment, right, there's a specific person in seating clinic, and the PT or OT may not even get involved with that. So you're going to have students who are seeing their OT and PT at school far more frequently than they would be seeing anybody at Erin Oak. So, you know, how are they going to address that, I think, is one question I have. And I don't know that you have an answer for that, and that's okay. But that is certainly a concern for those kids, you know, from sort of grade 2 and up, because there's a good chance they don't have, they may be on someone's caseload assignment, but they have not seen them.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I don't know that they have a plan for that, other than I know they're trying to hire some staff from St. Elizabeth.
That was my second question.
But, you know, is there a recommendation of what those therapists can do to initiate relationships with families and start to build that, you know, quickly? Like, yeah. Is there something that you could think of that you would want them to do?
Yeah. So what I would have probably anticipated, and I'm trying to keep my bias on EOK down. What I would have probably anticipated, they knew this was coming down the pipe, and they knew this for the last 6 months at a minimum, right? Because the letters went out letting people know of this change. What I would have anticipated, COVID or not, because we can do this electronically, is I would have anticipated there to have been some sort of phase-in transition discussions. You know, we're in June now, so, you know, McLean is, okay, I'm putting my kid out there because it's the best example I have. But let's say a student is effectively now going to no longer have support from St. Elizabeth St. Elizabeth Healthcare. They haven't connected with anyone from Erin Oak yet. So is Erin Oak therapists connecting in the background with St. Elizabeth Healthcare people? So is there a transition? If so, what involvement does the CERT and the school team have? What involvement does the parent have? Because there's been no communication on that front, and it sounds like they're still in the process of hiring. So they may not even have adequate staff to be able to assign to some of these kids yet.
So they are still hiring. I know that they're hoping to have the hiring completed, you know, and do basically almost a month-long orientation with staff in August. So I can certainly flag that, you know, part of that August orientation could be therapists starting to reach out to families to start making some connections.
Yeah.
And getting some information. I mean, certainly when it comes to transitioning anybody onto a school support team, I have a lot of faith in our CERTs and in our school communities to, tell therapists about any given child. We know them so well, and help to bridge that relationship and support that relationship in the beginning. So I'm not as concerned about the service as I am about the experience of families. Because they may not see that piece, right? So they may not realize how much information is being shared when that PT first comes in about the child, but the parent's not going to know that. So how does that Erin Oak therapist communicate that with parents? I think is going to be critical, and I'll certainly flag that for them because they're not used to that, right? They're used to parents being there
being
when
in the
they
center.
see a child. Yeah,
absolutely. So that would be great if we can find out sort of what that transition piece is going to look like as far as now transitioning those kids to that school-based program with therapists that may or may not know them at all. I think that would be helpful. And transitions are tough enough as it is, and now you add in a different care team for them. There's going to be a learning curve there. So that would be great, Denise. From an SLP perspective, so talk to me, well, from all of the services, but talk to me about a referral. So you've got a child right now who's receiving SLP with St. Elizabeth. Are they being re-referred back into the system and possibly waiting 3 years for SLP services now through Erin Oak?
No. So if they've already been, so say they're in the middle of their sessions with the SLP, say they have 5 of their 10 in, they'll automatically be on caseload with Erin Oak for their last 5 sessions.
So then what happens for the continuation of those? We re-refer?
Yeah.
And is that a 3-year wait list?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't a 3-year wait list before.
No. So what they've done, and we strongly advised them not to do this because it is specifically disadvantaging the children in Halton Region compared to Peel, is they've harmonized the wait list. So whereas in Peel, a student may have been waiting 2 years, and in some parts of our region too, Burlington was usually 18 months and Oakville might have been 6 months. Now they're putting it into one common wait list. How that works when you're assigning staff geographically, I don't really know. But what they're saying is they will be reallocating services based on where the needs are on that wait list that covers both Halton and Peel. We strongly disagreed with that at the table. We felt it was really unfair to our Halton families, but that is the decision that they've made.
So we could potentially see a child go 3 years without a school-based SLP intervention once their existing sessions end.
For articulation.
Articulation, yeah. Because I know I know our board comes in from a language base, but from an articulation perspective. So if they've been consistently receiving that service, we could potentially see them fall into a 3-year gap.
Potentially, yeah. Now, again, Erin Oak is hopeful that with a model of running groups and using speech therapy assistance, that they'll be able to bring down that wait list significantly. And quite honestly, they should be able to, because there is a way more efficient model of delivering those services than what was being done. So I am hopeful for that, but there's no question that next year is going to be a little bit challenging.
Again, from a wait, and I'm watching the chat, so if anybody is putting in the chat and I'm still going, please let me know. And then that wait list conversation is the same as it pertains, let's say, to a PT perspective. Once they're finished off, let's say that they finished off all of their, their visits they had allocated to them for this school year, they have to go back onto a wait list now for PT.
Yeah, I can share with you that Erin Oak is projecting that there will be no wait list for PT services once they've transitioned to their model of using physical therapy assistants. What they're doing as well is they're looking at some of the children that would have been seen in center as well as school-based, and sort of reshuffling some of their staffing over to the school-based program from the in-center, because they won't be seeing as many kids through that route because it's the same therapist. So I think that they're thinking that they're actually going to be able to have more PTs than we did through the LINs because of how they're going to allocate their staff. So they're projecting that, there should be no wait list for PT at some point this year.
Okay. Marika, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just curious, do you have an idea of the wait list times for the different therapies for OT, PT, speech? Do you have a general idea of what it looks like?
So I'm pretty sure that OT was around 6 to 9 months, and PT was similar. Let me just see here. I found it. Okay, so the speech list is 31 months, and they're hoping to reduce it to 24 months. OT, they're looking to have 0 wait times, and currently it's 6 to 12 months.
Okay.
So that's now, you know, how the tiered model of intervention for OT translates into the schools. It's not staffed, and none of the models in tiered intervention or OT right now are staffed at the level that was researched for Partnering for Change, which was 1 day a week. So I don't think they're, you know, so how a half a day a month translates into that. They may not get to tier 1 because they may have to be focused on the tier 2 and the tier 3 kids in that school.
Does the wait list also follow them into high school? Like if they're put on the wait list for OT in grade 8, does that transfer over to high school? I'm just curious.
So it does for speech. I would assume it does for OT and PT as well. Again, they're hoping that there won't be a wait list, but I would assume that if there was one, then it would carry over into high school, but I can double check.
That would be great if you could find that out.
And Denise, do you know if they'll be following the same model as far as recommendations for number of visits, et cetera? Because currently that is done now on the recommendation of the CCAC or LIN coordinator, whatever you want to call them. So how will they make the determinations onto how many visits a child will be receiving for any of those disciplines?
So they have different service pathways that they will be starting for all of the different disciplines. And there's different criteria of those pathways. I've seen them in theory, sort of, you know, on a screen, but they haven't sent them to us in hard copy. I can certainly say that SEAC has requested a copy of those service pathways and the eligibility criteria, and ask that, you know, if Chris can get those to me, that they be sent out to you guys before the end of the month. If not, I'll ask for them for September.
That'd be great.
If they don't have them finalized.
Okay. And are we going to be, so I know that Dan put his hand up and asked for a copy of this presentation, and that's no problem. But, you know, from an FAQ, from a communication perspective, I'd like to say in theory that Aronoke is very, very communicative with their families, but unfortunately we haven't seen that be the case always. And I am worried about families not understanding this and not knowing what's happening. And so, you know, is there a plan? I don't know if it's you or Camilla, but is there a plan currently right now to, you know, really let parents know what this is going to look like, what that plan might be for August, what they can expect in September come this change of services? And the reason I say things like that too, Denise, is that, you know, if there's a family that's currently receiving, let's say, active articulation, or they're currently receiving a block of therapy, I don't know, whatever that looks like, right? They've got some OT coming in, assisting with hand over hand or things like that. They might want to have that heads up to be able to look for some of those options privately to fill that gap. And so I think, you know, as much lead time as they're going to have to prep for that, I just wonder what that communication is going to look like.
Right. So my understanding is that a letter did go home to families from their service providers through the LIN earlier in the school year. That's what we were told. There is a follow-up letter that Aronoke is going to send us that's going to go to families. We can certainly share that with SEAC members, or maybe one or two of you to sort of give us some feedback of if there's missing information that you feel might need to be clarified, and go back to Aronoke and ask them to, you know, do an addendum to the letter or see what that would look like. I have to be honest, I'm always cautious of taking ownership of Aronoke's services.
I agree.
Because what happens is that when we ask for feedback on services, people say, well, I don't like your SLP services. And what they actually mean is they don't like the Aronoke SLP services, not ours. So I think it is important to know that we host these services, but we don't control these services.
Yeah.
And we host this staff, but we don't hire or manage the staff.
Yeah.
And I do want to make sure that that distinction is really clear for parents, so that they know that if they have a concern about the care that they're getting, that they would really call Erin Oak.
So, and that's a very important point, and I feel the same way. I don't want any of, anything that sort of may transpire negatively to have an impact, because we know the work that we do at the board, and we know the good work that we do, and so I wouldn't want to have that. And I think that will be part of it, is parents understanding, because currently right now, if there's a concern with, let's say one of the service providers, there's usually a team meeting, there's a conversation with the coordinator. I guess that information is all going to be shared with parents. So let's say that they do have an issue with the SLP or the PT that's providing service to their child. Will they be given the name of a coordinator to contact directly? Is that going to go through the CERT with their disapproval of the services? Like, how is that going to, or just questions around things like that? Like, what role will the CERT play versus the parents calling Erin Oak directly to speak with their coordinator? If they have a concern over number of visits or whatever that looks like.
So every board is going to be assigned an SBRS coordinator, and we will make sure that the CERTs and administrators, in the schools have that information, so that if parents do have concerns, the CERTs can direct them to call the people who have the ability to make the change.
But that's one CERT for the whole board, whereas right now they're assigned a coordinate, like they're assigned a case manager right now. So you may have a case manager dealing with a number of schools, but that on your team you have you have SLP, PT, OT, a case manager from the LIN, your CERT, all those people. So
I feel like there's not going to be a case manager model like there was with the LIN, but let me double check that. Okay. I think they were going to kind of like a lead clinician, how hospitals have like an MRP, a most responsible physician. I feel like they were going to identify of that clinical team, if multiple services were involved, a lead professional to do that sort of case management coordination piece. I know that's what was discussed early on, but let me double check to see how they're going to work that.
Right. I'm trying to be super optimistic, but I'm worried. I'm worried about this transition for families.
What I will reassure you is that, it's really in Erin Oak's interest that this goes well. There's a lot of spotlight on some of these services. I was in a phone call with Chris Hartley the other day. She said Ministry of Ed had asked to speak to them. I don't know what that was about, but hopefully it was about, we're expecting great things. And I do know that while we were late invited to the table, they have really taken seriously some of our feedback that we've given them, and they do want to work with us. I think, to your point, that we need to communicate with parents about what the changes are happening. Do you think it would be helpful if parents were invited virtually into the first session that their child had?
I do. And I know Chris Hartley, and I've had many conversations with Chris Hartley over the years over some concerns about parent engagement and parent voice. I think anything, Denise, that we can push on our end, because they do not have a family advisory committee there. They do not engage parents in the same way that some of the other CTCs do. Grandview Kids does a better job. Helen Bloorview does a better job. I am concerned about that parent piece. So anything I think that we can do as a board to try to help facilitate that engagement, or to invite parents in to have that conversation, I think would be really paramount for us as a board.
When we orient their staff, so Jody O'Reilly, Jen Thompson, and I are going to orient their staff. So we will make sure that we stress that, we are a community that values parent engagement, and that, we will help them figure out, how to connect with parents, but that needs to be top of mind for them for sure.
Awesome. That would be great. That'd be great. I think just, again, it's not going to, we may have bumps. That's going to happen. But as long as parents are engaged in that conversation at the beginning during that transition piece, I think that will set the stage for a positive, hopeful experience moving forward. Marika, did you have another question?
Yeah, I just wanted to give some input. So I have one kid who's actively in the system, and I actually haven't heard anything. So I think sort of that communication with parent component would be key. And of course, you're adding that extra layer with the whole COVID going thing. Anxiety's heightened. There's so many things changing for families, changing for children, and just you know, as you say, just sort of detailing this and explaining it all. But yeah, I've not really had very much feedback, and that's just coming from a parent who's in the system with their kid receiving services.
Okay, well, I
Yeah.
will absolutely give that feedback
Yeah.
to Chris later on this week
Yeah.
to say that, you know, that we are concerned because a number of our parents haven't heard anything about
Nope.
this.
And yeah, yeah.
And it is going to come out of left field for them.
Yeah, and like I say, you've already got a lot of, there's different layers to this. There's a lot of, you know, uncertainty with families, and now we're going to change something else up again. So I think there just needs to be some reassurance and some detailed explanation of what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dan, Camilla, I see you have your hand up, but Dan, you have your hand up as well. Do you want to ask a question?
Along the same lines, I think it looks great with the integration of services, but communication is the key piece here. I guess all the parents are going to be a bit worried on the transition, and the more communication we can facilitate, the best for everybody. So there's two pieces that I think we maybe focus on. One is, what is the communication that we as SEAC and as from our organizations we can share with them at this point? And second is, what is required from parent side to facilitate with the integration or transition? So if these two, I guess, initial steps are kind of figured out, then I think everything else will kind of follow in place.
Camilo, did you want to?
I'm just wondering if it would be worthwhile, Denise, if we and through you, Madam Chair, to have Erin Oak come in possibly to SEAC in the fall to present and maybe receive this feedback directly from our association members and reps. Again, to hear some of the concerns they have, both as parents who've experienced the services, and then obviously on behalf of their associations. Again, just as a way to be collaborative, and not as a, you know, a tack session. And I don't suggest that's what it would turn into. Brenda, and I'm looking at you.
Hey, I've been pretty good today.
But as a way to really, you know, kind of recognize that this is a change. I've seen some comments that it seems like it's a change that's going a little bit backwards, it seems. Again, but maybe allow them the opportunity to present what they see as an opportunity, maybe in a you know, as a positive moving forward, in how they will, you know, connect with families and present services. And then we, you know, the idea about communication can be brought up then, again, just so that they can hear right directly from our SEAC members. Yeah. Denise, do you think that they would be open to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. And maybe what we could do is even give them some of your questions and concerns ahead of time so that they can come prepared to address them.
Great idea.
Awesome. Great idea.
So Andrea Hughes, is October meeting, is that too late? I mean, because I mean, we really don't know what September is going to look like in any way, shape, or fashion when it comes to COVID. Is October SEAC meeting is again, I want to be respectful of knowing that, you know, I know that would that be too late in the school year in a way, even though it's a month in? Would that be an appropriate month to invite them in if they're open to it?
So I actually think that may not be a bad idea, Camilo, because I think that allows for an opportunity for, you know, the conversations happening in August, to, you know, get some of the therapists in, start the conversations, and then, you know, by October we may have a better sense what communication has been shared, what has transpired, you know, what has this looked like. I think that they'll also, you know, have a month in where they might be able to, you know, recognize perhaps maybe some gaps that they, you know, didn't see happen. So maybe October is a good time. You know, let them get settled, and then we can have the conversation.
Okay, so I'll have Andrea Hughes tentatively put that in as one of the presentations. Great. Denise, again, if you can connect with Andrea about the actual date, and then hopefully it works for them. And if not, we'll look at, you know, whether it be September or November be the alternate.
Awesome.
Okay.
Denise, one more quick question I have for you, and I'm just wondering if you can ask them about this. So I know for the family portal, so right now it's great because, you know, the SLP or the OT, whoever it is, writes out a letter, right? 3 copies are given to the school. So the CERT keeps one, you know, the parent gets one. So I'm wondering what their reporting is going to be. Is it going to be like that, or is it only going to be through the client portal? And right now, my understanding was, or at least pre-COVID, was you had to go into Center to actually get onto the client portal. And so for some families who do not have active services whatsoever at Erin Oak, they're not in Center ever. And I'm wondering if they are going to be looking at providing an opportunity for families to connect to that client portal or sign up for it without going into Center.
Yeah, I'll ask them.
Awesome.
And you know, the other thing is Erin Oak hasn't been in schools in a very, very long time. So
Yes.
they, you know, the only parents they interface with are their parents that seek out their services and are able to get to Center.
Yeah.
And that's not, that's, you know, we know for speech and language, that's about 1/3 of the students in kindergarten. So they're missing 2/3 of kids who have needs because their parents can't get to Center.
Right.
So OT and PT, I'm sure, are somewhat similar. So for sure, we'll flag that for them as well.
Awesome. I know part of it is because they need to have consents and things like that signed, but even if there's an opportunity for that to become part of that transition meeting in September or part of that initial discussion, because I think that was part of the reason for needing people to come in is that they had to actually sign physically some consent. So maybe, you know, that would be great. I just think it would make it much easier for families, and I'd hate for them not to have access to any of those progress notes, because I think especially at the beginning, they're going to want to know what's happening with the visits at the school.
Yeah, and in all honesty, I don't know if a parent requested a consult note in paper. I don't know that a professional can say no.
Fair enough. Parents may not know to ask, but that's a really good point. And then what copies are the school receiving too, right? Because the client portal, the family and client portal is specific to the client and family. So then I would think there has to be some sort of written record because the certs are going to need that for the kids' files, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, that would be great, Denise, if you don't mind. And then
no problem.
And then I will stop talking. Before I let Denise go, is there any other questions that we have on this? I know this is a moving train, and I'm sure we'll hear more about this, but just while we have Denise, is there any other questions, or are we good to move on? All right, looks like you're off the hook.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much, Denise. Okay, moving to item 3.1 is the approval of the minutes from our May 11th meeting. Did anybody have any questions, comments on those? And if not, could I get a motion to approve?
Here, this is Paul. I approve.
I'll move.
So Paul moved. Who seconded? Nancy?
Sorry, I'm having a hard time with my speaker right now. Yes.
Okay,
That was
perfect.
me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then also 3.2, approval of the minutes for the May 25th meeting.
I can move again.
Okay, Nancy, seconded.
Rhonda, I'll second.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Okay.
All right. Moving on to 4, do we have any declarations of conflict of interest? Nada? Good. Just want to make sure I don't miss anything here. Business arising. So the Maxi letter was sent, as all of you were copied on, and we copied it to the other SEAC chairs, and there was a bunch of other contacts that Maria provided, which was fantastic. And Andrea will be following up with a hard copy letter. Andrea, one question that we did have, and I completely forgot to bring it forward to you, but Maria had asked me is, I don't know that we saw Stephen Lecce on the initial distribution list. Is that something that we don't typically do, or like, are we directed to send it to somebody else on his behalf?
Well, we just sent it to like whoever you listed in that email.
Yeah.
Was Maxie, Nancy, Naylor, Claudine, and then the hard copy's already been sent
Okay,
to
perfect.
Stephen Lesher. But I mean,
Okay.
if you want, we can. And then it also went to the other SEAC chairs. But if you want, we can forward it. I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he's gonna get a hard copy. You know, I don't know if he reads emails or paper copies.
Right.
You know, Maria, what do you think?
Hard copy was suggested as a good idea. So it did go.
Okay, awesome. Let me just, sorry, who has, did somebody have their, oh, Marika, did you have your hand up?
I just wanted to say I thought it was an absolutely cracking letter, and I don't see any harm in sending it to him directly via email.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly forward that off. Just say, oh, sorry we missed you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Brenda, I think I just added those other emails because I wasn't sure if how handy those email addresses were. I guess I was just thinking that Stephen was a given, or Stephen Letcher was a given, but
yeah,
I mean, if hard copy went to him, that's great. But I don't think it would be any harm either in sort of forwarding and saying, yeah, we could say we've sent the hard copy, but in the meantime.
Yeah. Okay, if Andrea, if you don't mind doing that on our behalf, that I would appreciate it.
And Brenda, when you and I met, we talked about Doug Ford. Did we decide not to send it to him?
Oh,
he's a man of the people.
He is. Okay, let's copy him on it when we send it to Lecce.
I mean, I don't know if there was a reason we didn't, but why not?
No, I just don't think we thought. Yeah, I mean, it was there. We had that conversation. I'm feeling spicy. Let's copy him on that.
Well, and I will say, we did have our local Halton chapter president responded to a letter that was in the newspaper a while ago about gifted, and she wrote kind of a rebuttal, and the newspaper didn't publish it, but she did get a response from the premier's office.
Awesome.
Now, it was fairly kind of boilerplate and probably sent by not him exactly, but can't hurt to just kind of be there.
Sure, that's frame-worthy.
I think so.
Okay, Marika, did you have another question?
No.
Okay, good. I'm just gonna, sorry, and I apologize, but I'm not used to the hands, so I'm managing the hands and the chat, so bear with me. I'm gonna put your hand down here so I get you next time. Okay, so yeah, so we'll go ahead and do that, and that was great, and I think that was all that I had for Business Arising. Spec Ed Board Policy Review, we don't have any on there. So moving to item 7, here we are back at the Spec Ed plan review, and we are resuming that at page 52. So settle in, get your tea, get your drink, and off we go. Yeah, Maria, go ahead.
Hi, sorry. I meant to ask this last time and I kind of forgot. I just want to understand this, what we're looking at here. Is this what the board submitted to the ministry last July? Because I know that staff have told us a few times they also go through it closely and make changes. So I'm assuming, but I just want to clarify that this is the copy that was submitted last year and hasn't been reviewed by staff yet.
Yeah.
So is that correct? And then, sorry?
No, I was going to say Camilla or Wendy could answer that, but that's my understanding. Yes, that's true, Wendy says.
Okay, so then my next question is, what is next steps? And I know I've been here for a few years, so maybe I should know that, but I will admit that it gets a little bit fuzzy sometimes. It takes a few years to kind of really understand what's going on. But also, I think it hasn't always been the same. So will we get a copy kind of before it goes to the ministry? Here's the, the revised copy. Can we get a copy that's kind of redlined or whatever that kind of shows so we can see what the changes are that were made? Just kind of wondering how we sort of go from here to ministry submission.
Yeah. Wendy or Camilla, do you want to address that?
I'll begin, and then I'll have Wendy fill in if I've left anything out. So in the past, and I've only gone through this process of the one time last year. Again, I may be mistaken, but I thought last year we had staff review the plan prior to being reviewed by SEAC and making suggested changes prior to coming to SEAC. And I think you would have seen those changes. That way, when it finally has SEAC's eyes on it, and once it's approved through SEAC, that's what we submitted to the ministry. But again, this is a year ago, and I thought it was because of COVID, and we didn't have a chance for staff to go through it in depth prior to being brought to SEAC. We have never in the past submitted to the ministry a redlined copy version of the plan, just the final version. I know that Maria didn't ask about going to the ministry, you asked if you could all receive it. Again, we could submit it to you, but recognizing that what we submit to you, even with a red line, we will be submitting what's been approved through this process to the ministry because of the July. I forget what the deadline is, if it's a hard deadline, but again, we do submit that to the ministry. If I'm not mistaken, it is posted somewhere on our website. But if you'd like all to be emailed a copy, I don't see that being a problem.
Maria, did you have a follow-up on that before we start on this?
Yeah. Well, sorry, I wasn't sure if there was more, if Wendy was going to add anything to that, but I just wanted to clarify just one thing, because the word approval was used a couple of times, and I just want to be clear. I don't think we're not approving anything, because we're making sort of recommendations and comments as we go through it. I don't know that every single recommendation and comment is going to make it through. And also some of the things, we're not talking about how the changes are, right? So we're not actually, I don't really see it as an approval. I see it as a feedback opportunity.
Yeah, and you're right. I probably misspoke. It's we're taking your suggestions, and for the most part, again, if there seems to be consensus, and if there seems to be no true objection from staff from a logistics standpoint, we are making those changes as we go. Andrea Hughes is online with the Word version of this, making those changes. So although you're technically right, you're not approving it. We are in the process of listening to your suggestions, making those changes where we think it makes sense. Again, and unless staff that have a more intimate understanding or oversee a certain section have any real objections against what's being suggested by SEAC. So what we're, the changes that we've talked about to this point, for the most part, if I'm not mistaken, Andrea Hughes, we've incorporated those comments, those recommendations into the plan that will be submitted.
Okay, that's fair enough then, if no one else has any other thoughts on that.
Maria, I will tell you, remind you what we did last year. As Camilo said, we had more time and we started earlier because we weren't in COVID. But what happened was you were in groups. If you recall, you did have lots of feedback. We went through all that feedback, and it was actually Joan Crew, Camilo, Andrea Hughes, and myself that went through it all, because Andrea was coming on new and Camilo was reviewing it for the first time. Then I went to all the stakeholder groups to review your feedback. I don't know if you remember this. Then I came back to a SEAC meeting and went through it all with you and said, we did make these changes, this one we didn't, and this is why, this is what this meant, that kind of thing. So then we went ahead and I worked on just putting it all together with Andrea Hughes and Joan for the July posting. What we're going to do this year, as Camilo said, actually it's like we're doing it together and we're having those discussions in real time. So everything we've sort of put in those changes will be reflected. But we're going to have a little, it'll be Anita Bader and Ashley Fliss from our consultant team who are going to spend a little bit of time in the summer putting it all together with this feedback and making sure that it's nicely formatted, because we are aware of some of those issues that you've pointed out, because we've never had a single author, if you know what I mean. So we're going to go through and clean it up for the July posting. So you should see all of the changes that are being made right now. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, do we want to start? So we are on page 52. Is there any questions, comments?
Sorry, I do have a couple, sorry.
Okay.
Just one question, and then there's a few things that I just thought might be helpful to have hyperlinks. I always find sometimes if I'm reading something and it references a legislation or something, I might want to go and look at that, and it's helpful if there's a link there. So if possible, so under who gets the report and where will it be stored, the 5th bullet at the end references section 72, subsection 1 of the Child and Family Services Act. The second last paragraph references the Municipal Freedom of Information, MFIPA, and Personal Health Information Protection Act. And then at the very end also, I guess again, it references, I don't know if that's FIPA 51.1. But I also had a question. The last bullet under who gets the report and where will it be stored, it says that the student's assessment, I guess, may be subject to a peer review in accordance with the assessor supervising member's professional college. If there's an objection to a professional college receiving the child's file, it is important to discuss this when the assessor speaks with the parent or guardian about the consent process. So I'm just wondering if this is something that parents would be aware that might happen so that they can make that objection, because otherwise they might not know that that's even a possibility. So will they be kind of advised, unless you object, this may be shared with, etc. Wasn't sure about that.
Can I jump in there a little bit? I mean, I know
Sure.
I'm representing Voice for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Kids. I think you have to be careful when you're with parents because there's some fear that you might instill if you make a comment like this might be reviewed. I think in the event that you are audited, which I have been by the college, that's when you may want to let your parents know. I don't know if it's appropriate to be divulging or even discussing that at your intake meeting and your review meeting. Is Oliver on the line?
Patricia, I know Patricia Codner has a comment there. Patricia, do you want to speak?
Yeah.
Yeah, Patricia's comment around the Family Services Act link, I think, Brenda, so we're going to be adding that.
Okay, sorry,
Oliver,
yeah, okay.
Oliver is on the line to speak to that final
Perfect.
bullet about
Thank
the
you.
peer review. Oliver, can you speak to that if you may? Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to agree with Rhonda in that this is something that.
No, get up and turn
the. Can you hear me?
Sorry, go ahead, Oliver.
Okay, so I would agree with Rhonda. Now, there's two ways to handle this. It's if somebody gets audited, at that point they can discuss it with the parent. If we put this piece into the informed consent, it would be adding to a long list of things that we have to discuss with the parent, and there's already a lot of things on there that we have to discuss with them in terms of limits of confidentiality, in terms of all the reporting requirements. So it is a bit of become a bit of an art for a provider for psychoeducational assessments to go through that informed consent with the parent without actually kind of deterring parents from wanting the service, because there's so many things that that can happen. This one, like Rhonda said, is one that is a remote possibility, and obviously, if that was the case, we would check with the parent if they are in agreement with that.
Okay.
Okay, was there something else for that area as well? Okay, are we good to go to the next page? Yep, Andrea Ricci, go ahead.
Okay, the only thing I had on this one on page 53, I noticed that 3 types of assessments have been listed. I'm just wondering, you know, there were others listed on, I think, page 42, like behavior, hearing, audiological assessments. Is there a reason why we're not including other assessments here?
Sorry, does somebody want to?
Or should we be adding, I can reposition it, should we be adding other assessments to this section? I'm not sure why only those 3 are listed. Would it be helpful for parents to know the processes for the others, or at least a more in-depth description like we have here?
Sorry, can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Oliver.
So this section is referring to, if I'm on the right page, is referring to which reports we actually review in psychology. So that's psychological reports, gifted assessments, and I can't see the bottom for a second, and the speech language are reviewed by speech language. Sometimes there's reports that are crossing different disciplines. I mean, what's not in there is the audiological reports, which we would give to our audiologist. I guess we could, if we're having a section that is about reviews, we could add those, same as vision reports, that we then would pass on to Kristen Messina. So maybe it should be then also kind of visually separated a bit so that it's clear who reviews what. I mean, sometimes we review across disciplines too, if there is like, if there's multiple reports per student. For example, right now we have been reviewing a lot of reports that are coming in for students that are transferring from the public board grade 8 to our high schools. And some of these students with multiple needs come with multiple reports. And so sometimes it's important to have those together to see them. But to your point, I think to be complete, we want to obviously list all the reports that would include for us medical reports as well, psychiatric reports that we review in psychology, as well as the vision and audiological reports.
If I can add, Brenda, or through you, Madam Chair, Yeah, Andrew, that's an excellent point. I think what you see there is probably just the remnants of historical work that we've done. I think for the most part, Oliver, again, I hope you would agree that historically, most of the external reports that our department would have reviewed would have fallen under one of those three categories: psychological assessments, gifted assessments, and speech and language assessments. But you're right, more and more we are receiving external reports around audio, visual, and other behavior from behavior analysts. So it would probably make a lot more sense to include those so that parents are aware when they come with an external report what the process is. So we will endeavor to add that language around those other external reports that our staff may have to review in the future.
So Maria, you had your hand up after this point?
Yes, I did. So under psychological assessments, the fourth bullet says the use of tests with age-based scores based on Canadian norms is preferred. And then under gifted assessments, the second bullet says results obtained must be based on Canadian norms. Test data from outside of Canada may require supplemental screening to determine eligibility. So it seems like the way I read that anyways, there's a different standard. So for non-gifted psych assessments, we're preferring Canadian norms, but for gifted, we're requiring they must be Canadian norms. So why is that just worded awkwardly, or do we have a different standard for the two?
No, that's correct. For the gifted screening, for that purpose, there is a Canadian norm test, and it is important to have Canadian norms because norms differ. For example, the US norms are a little bit weaker. So if we had a child who was tested with the WISC with the US norms, they might theoretically not meet criteria if they were tested on Canadian norms. In other assessments, there are a wider range of tests that we use and for different purposes. So this is not for a specific cutoff, but it's a diagnostic assessment of different areas of processing, different domains, and for some of those tests, there are no Canadian norms, and for some of the tests, it's not that relevant. Like, for example, there's not a lot of research that would suggest that there's differences between Canadian and American children in terms of fine motor development using those norms. Where it is more of an issue is those higher level reasoning skills, particularly verbal comprehension and so on. So that's why it's more specific to the gifted screening, because there we're not talking about a general profile with multiple sets of that data, but here we're talking about a specific test that has a cutoff score.
Okay, are we good to move forward?
Does that make sense to everyone, just in terms of what Oliver said?
Yeah.
Okay. It's just basically that in a psych battery, you're using many tests that cross different areas of processing. And many of those tests do not have Canadian norms. We're reduced to using the tests that are available to us. And in gifted assessments, usually across boards, they're using tests that are normed on Canadian data, Canadian children, which is actually ideal. I'll be quiet now.
No, it's all good.
Thanks, Rhonda.
No, that's good. Thank you, Rhonda. Do we have an issue often with tests coming from outside of Canada, I wonder?
Sorry, I'm just turning on my camera. It's rare. It's really rare. I mean, on occasion, we would have a child coming from from the states. Sometimes they don't even have intelligence tests, or they just may have a group test or other data. And usually what we recommend in those cases is for the parent to agree to do a test that we can do. And for those cases, we can do it probably usually very quickly. There's not a wait time or anything. So that helps us to be able to compare really where these students are compared to the population.
Okay, next page. Is there anything for this page?
Sorry, one really quick question. It refers to a procedure. The board has a procedure, I guess. I'm just trying to find it. Do we have, yeah, our administrative procedure. Does the board have a policy as well? Do procedures always attach to a policy, or do we sometimes have procedures without policies? Not sure about that.
Does anybody want to take that?
I can speak to the procedure in terms of the process, but I don't think we have an actual policy on it. It's just a memorandum around how we engage external agencies.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering if there was a policy in it, because if there was, it should maybe be mentioned as well, but I wasn't sure if we had procedures without policies. I just wasn't clear about that. So sounds like maybe we do.
You're through you, Madam Chair. You're right. There are for the most part, most of our procedures are attached to a policy, and I'm not, to be honest, I'm not sure that I was under the impression we did have a policy around PPM 149, but it seemed, again, I've
not to my knowledge, Camilla, but I could be wrong.
Okay, thank you.
I don't recall.
So
I know the procedure.
So if that's the case, it wouldn't be that unique in that we do have some procedures in the board, not just in special education, but in other under other portfolios and in other departments that are not attached to policies.
Okay, are we good with next page? Oh, sorry, Andrea, did you have another question?
Yeah, just a question, I guess, about what we just heard about Erin Oaks and the occupational therapy and physiotherapy kind of arrangements. Is that something that should be reflected at all within this document? I'm triggered now because I'm seeing coordination of services with outside agencies. Is there a home for that kind of information in this document?
I mean, my personal opinion is I think there's too many. I still think there's too many unknowns. I mean, we list them as being an outside agency. But I don't know. I just don't know how much I'd want to commit to in this before we have all the, all the bugs worked out. And that's just my personal opinion. Somebody else can certainly.
May I interject? I can't personally speak to Erin Oak Kids, but what I would like to say is under this procedure, every year a revision of the document, the agreement is made with all the external agencies, and that's where all the changes would be captured in terms of what they need to bring forward. So we do have a review committee that would go through the documents to ensure that all the revisions or all the changes were highlighted in the actual PPM contract that they provide us with. And maybe Oliver can speak to Erin Oaks or Denise, but in terms of the ones that I manage, every year there's the renewal process that all the external agencies like ADAPT, REACH, like ROC, Woodview would have to complete, and that's where all the changes would be embedded.
So through you, Madam Chair, Erin Oak will be completing a PPM 149 agreement for school-based rehab services. They've committed to have that to us the first week of school in September.
Okay. Andrea, does that help?
I think so, because I think there's a link here to, it says here PPM 149, so there'd be a link to these kinds of agreements, or that's just a general procedure?
That's a general application that the agencies would tap into in order to revise their document.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, if that's, it was just a question.
And all the agencies that have agreements with us are also listed on the public website under the community tab.
Okay, do we want to keep going? Okay, is there anything for this page?
I have some information just to share in terms of Glenda Brown, our Chief of Mental Health Programming, unfortunately was unable to attend tonight. So she asked me to share some highlights with regards to, obviously we would have had a completed strategy for this for you to review, but because of COVID and not having certain stakeholder meetings and so forth, that did not occur. So I'll just read what she shared with me if that's what you want, or Camilo, I don't know if you can guide me, but if the information can be provided in the fall and then it could be looked at then. I don't know, which way would you prefer?
Patricia, if you can share some of the highlights. So we were going to be making some significant changes to the mental health well-being strategy based on the work from this year's mental health and well-being committee. And so, Patricia, if you could just maybe share some of the highlights that Glenda shared with you and I for SEAC, and then once we share with you the entire special education plan, you will see all the other details as part of the mental health and well-being strategy as well. So thanks, Patricia.
Yeah, so just a reminder, our Mental Health and Wellbeing Advisory and Steering Committee will continue to meet 3 times per year, and we are continuing to increase the stakeholder membership to human rights and equity, religious consultants, special education consultant, administrators, chiefs of service, superintendents, student voice, community agency representation, parent voices, and SEAC and trustee, etc. In September 2020, we will begin the process of developing and writing the next 3-year mental health strategy and addiction strategy, which would be 2020-2020. That will allow the current climate needs of our students, families, school, and community. Recognize it may look and feel different as we move into a new virtual practice and adapt strategies accordingly. Some of the high priorities are going to be focused on social emotional learning and literacy, developing an intentional and explicit plan around supporting transition back to school after the pandemic, supporting all students recognizing a collective grief loss of past school year, and roll out youth suicide response protocol, prevention, intervention, and prevention system-wide. Also with a big focus on system-wide bullying prevention strategy, and continue to utilize our tiered model of delivery that we have in place. And I think those are the major highlights, with continuing to deepen our work in collaborative with the community partners and agencies in supporting our referral and our pathways to broaden the circle of support for students and families in Tier 2 and 3.
Thanks, Patricia. Maria, you had a question about page 57 or a comment?
Yeah, I guess it was more a comment. Just the first 3 paragraphs are kind of I think outdated, or I don't know if it's still relevant to have there, but like it talks about things from 2011 to 2014 and some funding. I don't know if all of that's still relevant. I know like there's been changes to funding, so I'm sure when staff go through it that they would update that stuff, but I just wanted to kind of comment on it quickly. And also a couple of possible hyperlinks. In the second paragraph, talks about staff development. So I don't know if we could hyperlink to that part of the plan. And at the end of the 4th paragraph, it talks about the board's suicide prevention, intervention, and post-intervention procedure. So that might be another helpful hyperlink to have there as well. And I guess just quickly on the next page, at the end, it talks about during the next phase of our mental health strategy, 2019 to 2020, we'll continue to enhance broader community collaboration, etc. So I guess maybe just an update since we're at the end of that school year, which again probably would be coming anyways once the staff kind of does their part on this. But that was it.
Okay. Andrea Ricci, did you have your hand up again, or was that from last time?
Yeah, I just raised it for this.
Okay, go ahead.
Actually, just the last point that Maria read out. I noticed that something that was there the last version of this document was around the plan to develop programming around restorative practices, and I don't see that here anymore. So I just wanted a bit more understanding around kind of what was involved in that, and has there been a change, a decision to not focus on that, or what was the change there?
So anybody want to take that?
I unfortunately I can't. I don't have the answer to that, Andrea. Of if there was a change in our philosophy around restorative practices, with Glenda not being here tonight, I can't speak to if there was a specific decision. And Patricia mentions she can't either. Again, as Patricia said, Glenda shared with me and Patricia in this last week the mental health and well-being strategy that we will update, which will include hopefully the updates on the dates and some of the ministry documents that are referenced in here, but definitely will update the plan around the strategy 2019-2020. I will ask Glenda about the piece around restorative practices. Andrew, can you direct me where you saw that restorative practices piece and where you see it missing now?
Yeah, in that last sentence there, that during the next phase of our mental health strategy, it was part of that. So on the 2018 plan, it was page 58.
Okay. So you're looking at an old plan and you're comparing it to this new plan.
Yeah, because when we did it last year, I had more other notes on that plan, so I kind of just cross-checked against this one, and that kind of I noticed that, so I thought, oh, has that changed? Like, I'm not even sure what that means, so I just thought I'd ask about it.
Okay. And again, I'll bring that to Glenda's attention to see if she has some specifics around the elimination of restorative practices from this plan. It may be that it's part of a practice that we might not be utilizing in our schools any longer. And again, if we are, I don't know the reason why, but I can get that information too. I don't have that offhand.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next page. Okay, anything here? Go to the next. Okay, staff development. Yeah, Maria, go ahead.
Hi. Okay, so I had a couple things here. I'm going to try and follow my notes. I thought in the first paragraph, it might be helpful to have some bullet points in a couple of places. I'll just leave that to staff to kind of go through and figure out in the interest of time. At the end of the second paragraph, it talks about staff development updates are provided at each SEAC meeting. So I wondered if links to our SEAC minutes might be helpful there, if people are wanting to see some of those updates. Under the professional development training for certs, there's a couple of acronyms that I don't believe are in the appendix. So KTEA and TDR. I know what TDR is, but I don't think it's in the appendix. But I also noticed, oh, okay, sorry, a couple things. Okay, I noticed that for the special education teachers, so the SETs, part of their training includes range of placement information. I think that would be helpful to have, and maybe it's just missing from the list, but I think that training would also be helpful for certs. And I would think more so for certs, because the SETs, as I understand it, they're actually teaching a special education class, whereas the certs are more involved in determining, again, to my understanding, more involved in determining proper placement options for students. And so they should really be aware of all the placement options that are available in the board. And I have personally experienced some confusion around that with certs in the past. So I think that would be good training to include there. One of the points, effective communication with staff and parents. I thought that might be a good session for SEAC to provide some feedback to the board that they could use to develop that training. So what do we hear from parents about the communication that could maybe be improved for certs to be aware of? And I'll just, well, I had some stuff on the other page, but I don't know if anyone has anything else on this page. So I don't know if you want me to continue and then.
Yeah, I've got, Andrea has a comment here.
Okay. So I'll wait.
Okay.
So I think that was it for that specific page.
There was some comments in the, about your questions. Camilo, did you, sorry, Andrew, before we get to you, Camilo, did you want to comment on what you put in the chat?
Yeah, Maria, you mentioned that those acronyms are not in the glossary of terms. Again, and maybe I have a different version of your spec ed plan. In my version, they are both in the definitions.
Okay, you know what I'm seeing now? KTEA is in maybe I missed it because it's KTEA-3 in the appendix. I don't know if that's.
It's just the version. It's the version of the test. Yeah.
Okay, and I missed TDR. Sorry, I don't know what was wrong with me there, but.
No problem.
Thank you. Yeah.
Trust me, if anything, I know, Maria, you're thorough, so I'm surprised you didn't see that. I would never question your thoroughness, that's for sure.
I think you have in the past, Camilo.
Those are about uniforms, Maria. Another time, different portfolios.
We'll take that offline.
Okay, thanks, Camilo. Andrea, did you want to go ahead?
I was just curious if there's any, I didn't notice any sessions covering ADHD or early intervention and identification. Are there sessions in here that cover those that I'm just not jumping out to me?
Wendy, can you speak to those, Wendy, if the type of PD we provide for our certs?
Right. So those might not be offered every year at our regular monthly CERT meetings. But what I would like you to just know is our special education consultants hold about 5 board team meetings each year with each school, and they review all of the profiles because, as you can imagine, that's a common diagnosis that comes up. So there's a lot of, you know, teaching and education going on at that time. And then just year to year, that PD can change. But we do actually, like when we run ABA for All and those kinds of things, we talk a lot about ADHD. I know this year we had a lot of really neat things planned for our ABA for All bonanzas that we didn't get to do. And Oliver's psychology team was teed up to do a presentation in every school actually around ADHD. So I guess the reason it wouldn't be listed there per se is because we don't run that particular one every single year. But I just want to reassure you it comes up, I would say, at every board team, and consultants and itinerant certs go through a lot of sort of in the moment teaching around that diagnosis and many others as they come up.
Okay, that's great. Just on the early intervention and identification, is there any training around that?
Sorry, early intervention and identification. Yes, again, I guess through board team, because a lot of what happens at board team, our students are presented to the special education consultants, the itinerant cert there, and the certs that are in the school, as well as the administrators. So they would be reviewing that again in real time, because it's early intervention that always precedes the consultant's agreement to have a more formal assessment through the psychology department or speech and language. So ongoing, that's like a good part of the work that our consultants do, is that early intervention. Again, I think Oliver's team would do some of that work too, as well as Denise's team through psychology and speech. I don't know if my colleagues have more to comment on there as it relates to psychology and speech staff and the work they do.
There's some notes there on the side about PD for ADHD, for EAs, and then offering trauma-informed training.
So in terms of the ADHD training, we had started to provide some ADHD modules training to, we did it for the staff in the classroom, the program in Milton, and we just during COVID we did a package on ADHD for the EAs that was presented virtually to them. And in terms of early intervention, generally, and if Denise is still there, she could speak to that. Generally speaking, in terms of the sequence of assessments, professional assessments, kids get traditionally seen first by speech language before they come to psychology, because and we try to do other assessments, maybe not as standardized and educational assessments, just because in terms of learning disabilities, first we want to do the intervention in terms of a tiered intervention before we can say that any deficits that we find are related to a learning disability and not to a lack of opportunity or appropriate instruction.
So I'll just chime in if it's okay. In terms of early intervention training, the SLPs regularly partner with kindergarten teachers around supporting social communication by running stay, play, and talk groups. We also work with kindergarten teachers around language stimulation strategies and early literacy and phonological awareness. We've just created a new resource for kindergarten and grade 1 teachers that we had been hoping to roll out this spring, but we'll do it in September now around embedding phonological awareness activities as an early intervention throughout the day for students, for all students. So we really work with individual schools and teams to identify what their early intervention needs are and to tailor our support and PD accordingly.
Thanks, Denise. Yeah, Patricia, did you want to comment?
Yes, I just wanted to add that we have done quite a bit of virtual training to EAs around trauma-informed lens in dealing with our students. We've also, before COVID, we provided PD for certs, consultants, and several other itinerant staff to broaden the scope of knowledge around students who have been traumatized and the impact and the lens that we need to utilize in terms of assessing as well as delivering interventions to them. So we're continuing to do that, and hopefully we'll reach everyone in the board, but we've focused on those who are giving direct service at this point, but just to let you know that that's what we're also continuing to work on.
Great, thanks, Patricia. And Wendy Reed Purcell just commented that consultants and certs also received trauma training this year. Okay, are we good? I'm not rushing anybody, but I'm just taking a look at the time. So, okay, so page 62. Yeah, Maria.
All right, so I think just to go back to the last page where I had said those acronyms weren't in the appendix, not to sound like I'm making excuses for myself, but I think what my note meant, because I reviewed this before our first session reviewing the plan, I think maybe what I meant was that those acronyms maybe appeared for the first time here and weren't kind of spelt out, which I think is helpful to do at least the first time. So I could be wrong about that, but maybe just something else to kind of look for. As we know, there's tons of acronyms in Spec Ed and most people don't know what they all mean. But then on page 62, so again, another acronym, AFAC, and I just double checked, I don't see that one in the appendix. But also for the professional development training for new special education teachers, I see a reference to structured teaching, and I see a reference for planning life skills programs. So I don't see a reference for gifted classes. I think those are the three types of special education classes that we have, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if there's any others. So I'm just wondering why we offer training on 2 of the 3, but not the 3rd. Or is that just missing from the list and needs to just be updated in the plan?
I can answer that, Madam Chair, if you'd like.
Yeah, sure, that'd be great. Thanks, Jody.
Yeah, so I, along with Karen McCarthy and Ashley Fliss, do the new cert training. So it's actually just missing from the list. We do go through that when we review the process of our gifted screening. So we will review those placements and the gifted class placement. So it is just missing for the list if you just want to add that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jody.
And through you, Madam Chair, we will add the acronym AFAC. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't know what AFAC is, and if someone from the team could maybe enlighten me as well.
And Wendy, I think just it's assessment for functional communication or functional
communication.
Thank you.
Functional and augmented communication.
Okay, thank you. And we will update that. Thank you, Maria. We will put that also in the appendix.
And I was just going to say, yes, the ESC, we also review the class placements for ESC too, Wendy.
Perfect. We just have a question there. Maria's just saying, what is ESC? Well, never mind. Thanks, Camillo. Essential skills class for everybody.
Maria, those classes are typically for our students with mild intellectual disabilities or severe learning disabilities. And there's the regional classes.
Awesome.
So those are different from life skills, is that correct? I get confused, sorry.
Again, and you're not wrong to be confused. In our board, when we refer to life skills, we typically are referencing our secondary school programs. and as what you would consider life skills. So in elementary schools, we have our structured teaching classes for populations of students with developmental disabilities, ASD at times, and then we have essential skills classes for that population of student with a mild intellectual disability or severe learning disabilities.
Okay.
And then life skills, again, we refer to that. That's our high school. Those are high school classes.
So is that kind of the high school version of structured teaching? Is that how it goes? No, it's not that simple, maybe.
Again, and maybe I'm oversimplifying it. It might be a combination of structured teaching and essential skills. Possibly one of the consultants, can you weigh in on our life skills? Is it and some of our schools, we have a large population of life skill students, so we might have the ability to split those classes up into a more dedicated type of population. But if someone else could maybe kind of add to that.
Sure, Camillo, it's through you, Madam Chair. So one thing all students in life skills in secondary have in common is they all have a diagnosed developmental disability. And so, but with developmental disabilities, they can also have other things like autism, or some of our students might have cerebral palsy and developmental disability, or other, Down syndrome as an example, and a developmental disability. So Camillo is right. Many of our life skills programs tend to have students of a variety of abilities and profiles, even though they all have a developmental disability in common. So some of them would be split, and there would be more than one program going on, because some students with developmental disabilities actually read and write and participate in lots of functional numeracy and literacy kinds of activities, and they eventually go out to job placements and things like that. Whereas we might also have students who require total care, and they would be more like students that would be in our elementary community living classes, if that helps to clarify. So there's a broad range, but they all do have a developmental disability.
Perfect. Thanks, Wendy. Okay, do we want to keep going? Okay. Page 65. Okay, page 66. Yeah, Maria, go ahead.
So I had a question on this accessibility page on the second point, there's the 5 standards that list them out.
Yep.
And I think the only one that I see with a timeline was the first one. But the second point about accessible information and communication, so removing barriers and access to information. I don't see a lot on this page about that specifically, and I don't recall hearing a lot about that. So where is the board in terms of, like, I assume this is things like having material available in Braille or other ways that might be helpful to someone with low vision, because as I understand that exceptionality, it's not just people who are completely blind, but could be students that are low vision, so they're not necessarily using Braille, but they might need other accommodations.
Yeah.
And obviously this is not just for our students, this is for accessing information at the board. So I don't know if there's any timelines around that. And I'm just wondering if there's work being done in that area, because I don't know that I've heard about that, and I don't notice it on the website. So just wondering about that.
So I know that there's been some conversation around that, Maria, and Camilo, I'm sorry, I saw you sort of flash up there, and I'll let you respond, but I know that, I know that it has come up, and we've been looking at things like providing closed captioning on some of the videos that, we will be putting on our sites, and taking a look at making sure that any downloadable forms are accessible forms. So really taking a look at things like that. I can't speak specifically to the Braille piece, but I know that we have been chatting with communications about how we're presenting some of our information online, and some of the information that goes out to schools in a more accessible format. Camilo, you obviously will have more than I would on that, but that's just my initial contribution.
Actually, I don't have much more, but it's interesting that what COVID has done is kind of maybe brought to light this standard of the AODA around communication and access to communication from obviously from a Braille perspective, from a closed captioning perspective. I do know that we are in the midst of gaining the ability, and we have created closed captioning for all of our synchronous type learning for our students. And then obviously the next step is to support parents and families and stakeholders. If Jen Thompson and or Denise Colley have any further around this standard, with it, again, recognizing that from our perspective right now, it's from a student perspective, supporting students and their family, and mostly students in and around communication accessibility.
Through you, Madam Chair, we are absolutely continuing to work on captioning everything that goes out to students and to parents as best we can. In terms of the blind low vision piece, some of that is just making sure that students are aware of the features that may already be on their computer in terms of converting things to a high contrast or increasing the font size. That's where actually some of the virtual learning is an advantage, because it's much easier to enlarge print on a screen than it is on a piece of paper. So what we are continuing to support both parents and students in finding the ways to do that.
Dan, you had your hand up?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think the first one is the AOD compliance. All the government enterprises have to have a mandatory compliance with AODA 2.0, and now they have 2.1. So that's the compliance in all the material that's available at school, from the website to, I guess, audio and other lessons material, curriculum. There should be an assessment or some kind of a compliance level with the requirements in AODA. That's one thing. The other thing is, being a learning environment, I think it is probably, as was mentioned, part of the tasks are to actually teach students with visual disabilities on how to best use the tools at their disposal, whether those are screen readers or enhancers on the actual screen with the contrast, font sizes, and so on. So is there, I guess, an assessment on what exactly are these and how are they implemented? Or do they have to be, I guess, stipulated in the education plan?
I don't know on that. I don't know. Pat Daly has his hand up. Pat, I don't know if you wanted to just speak in general, or if someone wanted to speak specifically to Dan's question about the assessment piece. I mean, I know that we do assess accessibility needs and make sure that we're meeting those. Jen Thompson, yeah, do you want to answer that question?
Through you, I can answer it to a degree. For our students who have a blind low vision diagnosis, they typically work with WROS around the type of accessibility equipment that they may require. And we do have our blind, low vision itinerants who work with these students. So we do provide them all of the type of accessibility equipment that they may need to access their curriculum, and we fund that through SEA. And our itinerants do work with those students based on the assessment that they receive through WROS, and they teach them how to use all of that equipment so that they have full access to everything that they might need. So I don't know if that helps to answer your question, Dan.
Yeah, that has to do with the second item, which is what is done in terms of getting these students, I guess, proficient with using the enhancing ability tools. But in terms of compliance, I think that's kind of an official thing that's mandated by the province. So I think there should be some reference to the AODA compliance within the plan. Writing for sure, whether there is a roadmap to compliance or there is a level of compliance or anything related to it.
Pat, maybe you've got some insight onto that, because I know that as a board we do follow AODA compliance. So I don't know if you want to speak to that. And then Maria, I've got a point on your as well.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. I actually had my hand up a little bit for something a little bit higher.
Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, in terms of AODA, we are required to submit yearly where we're at in terms of our compliance. I was just going to touch a little bit on Ms. Lorenko's point about access to information and communication and removing some of those barriers. Yeah. So the ability to access websites in particular, or at least for blind, low vision, and some of the functionality around that has been updated in our newer websites, so our elementary and secondary websites. And in terms of our board website, the front-facing one to the public, we're starting the kind of the overhaul of that in this July. So that'll certainly be part of that plan as well.
Awesome, because that was going to be a question that I had as well. Thanks, Pat. Was you know, I have a pretty good grasp, I think, on how we assess student needs for accessing information. But you know, it was that larger piece. So how are visitors to our site accessing the information? Again, how are parents accessing information if they have accessibility issues of their own? So you know, like you just said, Pat, is blind, low vision, or accessible documents. Closed captioning, anything that we can do to make sure that we're providing alternative methods for people accessing that information should they require it. Yep, go ahead, Pat.
Certainly in terms of if people are accessing or beginning to access that information through school websites, with the updated websites, we just finished off the secondary school ones this year. We will have or do have greater ability to do that.
Awesome.
So basically, there is a roadmap. I think that for the compliance, and that's I think that what the status is right now.
Yeah, I'd say that's accurate, Dan. Yeah.
Yeah. And we can bring back, if there's an appetite for it, we can certainly bring that back as a conversation to have. One of our future meetings, just as far as, well, I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about it tonight, but not in that great detail, but we do have the accessibility plan available for people to take a look at, but maybe we can get an update, come the new school year as far as where we're at with some of those things. So so sort of back to the original point, I don't know if it's enough in this, like, do we feel comfortable enough with the way this is worded that we are compliant with or following the AODA guidelines? I don't know if we can attach a time frame to that right now. It's usually part of a bigger plan. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead, Maria.
So I just wanted to respond to that because I guess it was started off as my question.
Sure.
So for me, it was more just understanding, you know, what's happening there, because I feel like, I mean, I do have a little bit of familiarity with that low vision aspect of it. And I think, obviously it's not who I'm representing here, but we don't have a rep for that area. But I think it's one of those ones that I'm not sure people understand. And until I sort of gained some familiarity with it, I didn't either. So, and I know this isn't an education example, but it drives me nuts when I'm in the store and their store's closing and they turn off the lights. And first of all, that's getting harder for me because I'm getting older and my eyes are not as good as they used to be. But for someone who's low vision, that would be like pulling up to the wheelchair ramp because, sorry, the store's closed now and we're pulling up the wheelchair ramp. And that would never happen, right? So I have a little bit of a passion for that area because I feel it's not, there's not as much advocacy around it, but it does affect a lot of people. You'd be surprised. People can be low vision and you would have no idea. So it's a little bit of a, so it was more just to kind of highlight that a little bit. It's not one we talk about a lot, and I don't know if we have a lot of students, but again, we could have other stakeholders that have those, that are dealing with those issues. So that was
Pat,
it.
did you want to address that? I saw your hand was up. Sorry, Pat, did I get that wrong? Pat, did you have your hand up on that, or was I?
Oh, sorry, I muted myself. Sorry, Brenda. Some of that information, the multi-year accessibility plan is, there is a link to it a little bit further down the page. So it does go into a little bit more detail, both at the school level and kind of broader picture, kind of the roadmap up until, I think the plan is up until 2022, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay, Andrea, yep, thanks for participating. Okay, do we, and the fact that it does reference that plan, I think might be enough because that plan is updated annually, and we will get to it today. And all of the members of SEAC have a chance to take a look at that accessibility plan and make any suggestions or anything to it, or questions or that. But the plan is reviewed every year to make sure that we are adhering to what's going on. And the fact that I think that there's a link to that hopefully addresses any questions there could be around that accessibility plan for the board. Are we good to move forward on this? Yes, no, thumbs up. Okay, page 66. Page 60, thanks, Marika. Okay, page. Okay. Okay, SEAC, all about us. Okay, is there anything? Yep, Maria.
Sorry, I clicked on the little hand up icon, but
That's okay. Yeah, it doesn't always show up on my thing quick enough, so I'm quicker on the chat. Go ahead.
No worries. Okay, so I had a couple of things here. This is about us, so we should have lots. Okay, a couple of the sentence, I think they're redundant. So again, I don't know if there's something left over in the first paragraph. The third sentence talks about local associations, and the fourth sentence talks about local associations, and they say more or less the same thing. So maybe just review that. And the last sentence, so it talks about can have up to 12 local associations. The last sentence talks about trustee and member at large membership. So I thought perhaps we should clarify the number of trustees and the number of members at large, and that they also have alternates. we mentioned the number of potential local associations, and just to make sure that's clear. So I'm just looking at my notes here. So the, let's see, 5th paragraph, I think, talks about the dates, time and location for SEAC meetings, and the agendas. Maybe we could also mention there that the minutes are also posted and have a link to those, and maybe to the videos now that those are being posted as well. And a couple of paragraphs later, it talks about the SEAC sound bites being shared via newsletters. I don't know if schools are still doing
I don't think
newsletters, so I don't know if that's just outdated.
And we haven't put any out for a while, so we should probably
No.
take that out. And if we want to,
well, that link, I did click on that link. So the ones we wrote before are still there, and I think they were pretty. I think they were. What's the word? They were. I think they're still relevant. Like, it was general information about things, so I think it's good to have them there. But yeah, so I just don't know if they're going out sort of anymore. They're just kind of parked, but.
I think they're kind of parked. But we can always resurrect that as far as just resharing them or letting people know they're there too.
Yeah. So that was it for that page.
Okay. Oh, we'll have to update that. Yeah, we'll have to update the Easter seals section. I think that might be the only one that's out of. Okay, perfect. So sorry, I'm missing someone, I'm sure. Maria Story, hand up, page 69. Sorry, did I miss you? Or was that?
Yeah, that was me. I had, that's okay. I try to wait to see if someone else has comments.
I know, and I'm in a million directions. Sorry.
That's okay. Actually had a few things on this community consultation piece, which I feel is really important. And so I looked at the ministry. So the ministry, as we talked about in our first meeting, they actually have standards for school board special education plans. And that's why, why we sort of have this plan and why some of the things are in here that we find. So I didn't look at all the standards, but I did look at this. And I'm just wondering how we're doing some of the things that are in the ministry's standard. So I'm just going to read from the standard. It's in the ministry's policy and resource guide that anyone can reference. But one of the requirement is in developing and modifying their special education plan, boards must take into consideration issues and feedback from members of the community, such as parents, members of school councils, community organizations, and students. And then it also says the public consultation takes place with the assistance of the board SEAC and must be maintained on a continuous basis throughout the year. And the board's special education plan must describe the consultation process and must include the following materials, which one is summary of feedback received as a result of consultation with members of the community. So I'm not sure that we're doing any of that. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I'm not sure how we're meeting that requirement that the ministry has. So I'm just looking at my notes. It also talks about, it also says the Spec Ed plan must also provide information on the results of any internal or external reviews of existing special education programs and services that have taken place in the previous or current school year. So we did have, and maybe there's others, but obviously this is my area that I'm here representing. But we've had the Gifted Student Survey in January of 2018, the Parent Survey in April of 2019, and the staff reports on the cluster classes at Accelerated Learning, which were in September. So it seems to me that the results of those should be included here somewhere in compliance with this standard.
Or do we just need to send a link? Like, is that information available on our website that we can send a link to? Any of the consultations?
Through you, Madam Chair,
we would. Yeah, go ahead, Camilo.
They would, I mean, they would be part of reports that were public documents, board meeting agendas or minutes of an agenda. So we could definitely create a link that would take, any Joe Public, Q Public to that site to view the reports.
Sorry, you're saying in the plan you would put the link in. Is that
correct? That's what I heard Brenda suggest or ask, if it's possible to create a link rather than have those lengthy reports attached to an already lengthy document.
Sure. Yeah, and I don't know how it's normally done. I just noticed that was in there. And I guess the other point that I wanted to kind of clarify, I guess there's a couple of things. So in our plan, under community consultation, it says that information, opportunities for feedback, and consideration for programs and initiatives are brought forth through presentations and staff reports at monthly public meetings of SEAC. So that's true, and that's all good. Now, and of course, that's staff driven, right? So in the next paragraph, it says each SEAC meeting agenda invites association reports, subcommittee updates, and reports from other shareholder meetings. So I think maybe that's supposed to say stakeholder. That's one thing, but also wanted to understand a bit more about the association reports, because that would suggest that association reports are part of that consultation process. And I have used that in the past, but the last time I tried to submit an association report to bring forth some concerns of ABC, I was actually told that wasn't the purpose of association reports, that really they're a tool to highlight association events and resources and things like that. So is the association report part of the consultation process or not? So I think that needs to be clarified, and then the plan needs to reflect what it is. And then as well, if it's not, then how do SEAC members drive the process in addition to staff? Like if we want to bring forth something that we think needs to further investigation, how does that happen? And that's it. I know that's a big question, but
yeah, I don't even know that I have answers for that right now.
So I don't know if that's a conversation for further.
Camilo, do you want to pipe in?
Yeah, if I may, I mean, I'll attempt to answer your last question first. How does SEAC provide input? I think this is precisely what you're doing through this process that we undertake every year. If that's what you're suggesting, how do you have, how do you provide your suggestions? How do you provide your input? How do you ask questions around our plan? Again, I would think that this is the process that we undertake, and this is what we're doing right now. That's how SEAC provides that level of input. Around the community consultation, again, I don't have the document that you're referencing in front of me. I do want to look a little bit more intimately at what you're suggesting, having past surveys, having past reports as part of our spec ed plan. I'm not again, without seeing the actual wording of those documents, I don't know if that's the intent of the community consultation, is to include all past surveys of in and around special education, whether they were students of, parents of. I think the community consultation piece is to provide, again, I don't have the document in front of me, but it's more to provide input onto our plan, our SEAC plan. And although I guess you could argue that those surveys informed the board around gifted programming, which is included in our plan, I want to be careful that we don't, again, add so many different links and reports that it becomes so overwhelmingly cumbersome that it's really not a very kind of parent-friendly or stakeholder-friendly plan. So I do want to look at that section of that you referenced to see exactly kind of what language is used around community consultation.
So if I can follow up on that, unless there's someone ahead of me, I don't know.
Oh, go ahead.
So yeah, I think, can I suggest that we have a bigger discussion about this maybe in September or relatively early in the new school year, understand what the requirements are in the ministry standards. And I hear what you're saying. This is our opportunity for feedback, but I've always found it a bit difficult because it's all like, is this the process for describing, where we want to review programming that's available and services, or is it just about, how the document describes what the board offers? Because certainly, if there's reviewing the programming, or if associations feel that there needs to be some changes to programming, placement options that are available, things like that, those are huge things in and of themselves that, we would never get through this, right? So I know in the past it's sort of explained that this process was more about reviewing the document. How well does the document describe what the board's offering? Not so much about, gee, should the board be offering this instead or in addition or whatever, if you know what I'm saying. So
I do, Maria. Now I kind of have a better understanding, kind of the where you're coming from. The reality is our programs, our classes, are that we do run in the board. They are decided upon by staff based on obviously needs in the system, based on staff and resources. Definitely, we accept and we encourage input from SEAC around the different programs. And again, having a limited experience with SEAC, I do know that SEAC has in the past provided very valuable input on the different programs, and there have been changes based on that input. But to suggest that SEAC have some kind of authority to affect to make a change in a program, I'm not sure if that's the purpose of this plan, or SEAC. It's to provide input to the special education department. That's my understanding.
Diane, you have a question? Rabenda?
Yes, I do. When I read that particular paragraph, it says that the agenda invites association reports, and it would be a report of an event, maybe an event or a meeting, in the same way as we get reports from other organizations. We get reports from the cities, meetings that they've had, keeping us updated more than issues that they have. If they've got an issue that they want to discuss with us, a concern, then that would be placed in a letter and sent to the appropriate person. But if it's an association report or a subcommittee update and reports from other shareholder meetings, then I would take that as being the minutes of meetings that have been held by those organizations. Just my input. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Maria, you had your hand up?
Yeah, sure. So first I'll just comment on Diane's comment. So I guess that's my question is, what is the association report? Because in this spec ed plan, it is listed under community consultation. So to me, that's not letting you know that we're having a parent event this week. That's not consultation back to the board. And to Camilo's point, yes, I fully understand. It's been made clear that SEAC doesn't have any authority and that the staff decides. Well, I mean, I think trustees should have some input into that as well, and I'm sure they do, or they should. But it is SEAC's role to provide advice to the board about programming. So yes, we don't have the final say, but I do think it is very much our role to provide feedback and advice on maybe what we think the programming could look like, should look like. And I understand that it could go nowhere. I hope that doesn't happen, but I do think it's our role to bring that forward. And so I think this warrants, this is why we exist, in my opinion, and my understanding of the legislation. So I think it warrants a bigger discussion. I know we're not going to solve it here today. But I think it warrants a bigger discussion, I would say, earlier in the year, so that, it can impact our work next year.
Pat, did you had your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. And I'm not sure if just the next sentence might refer to what we're talking about, is that inputs provided through meeting, discussion, presentations, interactions between SEAC reps, trustees, and senior staff. So certainly, at least since I've been back with the board, I think many of the discussions we've had at the SEAC table have come to the board table, and some of those more kind of consultation reports that Mr. Renko referred to, I think they did come at kind of the behest of conversations at SEAC, and then the board of trustees did consider them and deal with them as they saw appropriate. I guess the other thing I was going to mention, when we do have those kind of reports or consultation, more consultative sort of things, while they are obviously in SEAC minutes, or they might make their way into board minutes, to highlight them a little bit more, there certainly could be a section on the SEAC webpage where it looks at sort of those community consultations as well, that maybe they're highlighted a little bit more.
Thanks, Pat. So maybe we add this, like we said, we're not going to solve this tonight, and and I know that it's 9:30, and I'm just looking at how many more pages we have and a couple more things to get to, and I just want to be cognizant of people's time. But I definitely think that there's an opportunity for us to sort of discuss the various ways in which SEAC can provide input, does provide input, and we can review some of that. Excuse me. I think it's a conversation worth having. So maybe we look at putting that again when we have our conversations sort of at the beginning of the year, when we're setting the stage for priorities for the year, or things we want to see from a presentation perspective. That might be an opportunity for us to have that discussion. Would that be sufficient, Maria?
Yeah, I think, again, I know we're not going to, especially given where we're at the time.
Yeah.
I would like to have some more discussion around it. I think it's valuable. So I think that's the best solution at this point. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think that's fair. Okay. What page are we at here? Okay. Yeah. Sorry. We already saw these ones. Haha. It's my favorite. Okay. Acronyms and definitions. I know that we did a really good job of vetting these last year and the year before. So I'm just wondering if anybody has comments or questions around things that are missing or need to be updated. Andrea, can you keep scrolling those if you don't mind? Okay, good. Okay. Okay, perfect, Maria. So we can take a look at putting those in. Andrea, do you need those spelled out? Maria's put them in the chat, but do you want us to list those out right now to make in your comments on the document?
I can just note them on like my hard copy here if that makes it
perfect.
go quicker.
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Nope.
Yeah, we'll make note of those, Madam Chair. We have access to the chat even after the meeting, so we'll make sure those are updated.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Madam Chair, in the interest of time, a lot of the other documents are board documents.
Yeah.
I do know that we have some other issues to get to. I mean, I guess we can go through them one by one if there's any questions around them, but we could also, those are the ones that our board staff for sure will be looking at because they are our own board forms, our own board processes. But I just want to make sure that we kind of get through this all so that because this is our last meeting and we do need to submit. So we can do that, or again, if we can kind of get through these forms, if there's any comments, and that's an excellent point, Maria.
Yes.
If you send them in by email, we'll review them and make any adjustments and corrections as needed.
Yeah, that is perfect. And that's what, and thank you, Camilo and Maria. And we sort of got to that point last year as well, where we needed to do some additional comments and things after we had reviewed it at SEAC. So yeah, that would be great. We can set a timeline for that. And if people want to send that in, I mean, I know people have had to drop off this call today, but they may still want to, so we can send out a follow-up email, letting people know that they're still free to send in those comments. So are we in agreement with that? And if we are, then I'll move to the next part of our agenda. Yeah, Marika's okay. Everybody else okay? Agree? Okay, perfect. Okay, awesome. I just want to make sure I don't cut anybody off if they... Okay, so Andrea, do you mind switching over and bringing our agenda back up? And I guess the accessibility plan, I don't have to spend a lot of time on it. I can just speak to it as far as, what it entails and what the process is. So item 7.2 is our accessibility plan, and I have sat on that committee for the past little while. I think I offered up the seat last year if anybody wanted it, but nobody took me up on it, so I'm happy to be a part of it. Andrew will bring it up there for you in a second. I know it was attached to our meeting package for your information. And as Pat had said, that plan, I'm just going to pull it up on my... Oh, awesome. Thanks, Andrea. So that plan goes until August of 2022. The whole idea behind the multi-year accessibility plan at the board is a couple of things. So, the objectives are to review everything that's happening at our board and attempt to not only remove barriers, but to actually look at preventing barriers. And so we do that through things like new builds or, new undertakings. It's taking a look at policies and programs and practices and making sure that, we're in line with legislative requirements, things like the AODA, and those are reviewed to make sure, again, that we're adhering to those. It goes through and describes the processes that are utilized to identify possible barriers. So, you know, as an example, there's a mechanism for people who have, let's say someone has identified a barrier, you know, at one of our schools or on one of our properties. There's a mechanism for them to send that information in. I'm just trying to think of what else it does. And, you know, by having this 5-year plan, it actually, you know, provides a commitment to review and make sure that we're updating that at least every 5 years. But then we also obviously look at this from an annual update perspective. So it was a little bit delayed in its process this year. Normally we get it out to SEAC a little bit earlier, but we had a change in ownership over who was responsible for getting that committee together. And, you know, with the COVID and all that, it just sort of set things off. So I have attached a copy of the plan for you to take a look at. I have gone through that copy as well, and will make suggestions to the committee on things that, you know, I have a couple of questions on, and that's really the role. So the different people that are on the committee will review this document. They will send in their input, their suggestions or questions, things that require clarification, and then we take a look at that on an annual basis, and update as necessary. So I would encourage, I feel like there's a lot on your plate here, but I would encourage you to take a look at this. It will perhaps answer some of the questions that we had earlier on about accessibility measures that we're taking at the board. You know, the most recent survey that was done, where people can get more information on accessibility or the AODA Act. So take a look at it. And again, I will follow up with an email to provide sort of a time frame. If you do have any questions or comments, you know, when we have a little more time in the past, we have actually physically gone through this during a SEAC meeting. But, you know, things are obviously a little bit different now in our current state. So please take a look at it. If you have any input, questions, comments, please send them to myself and I can represent those on behalf of SEAC to the committee. Is there any questions on that at all? And I mean, the committee composition is in there. Yep, Dan, go ahead.
Just a quick point I wanted to make with I guess with a new type of learning remotely right now, should be more emphasis on the, I guess, electronic type of accessibility, which is it's really complex. It goes from assignments to the different chat and meeting applications and all the I guess tools and applications that are used online or for board makers and everything else.
Yeah.
So all of these have to kind of be assessed for accessibility and recommended as such for different targeted group of students.
That's a really good point, Dan, and I can bring that forward too, for sure, as a conversation. You know, because you're right, and we don't know what things are going to look like in September. And really, I just think it's you know, it's been a great opportunity for us to really take a look at this distance learning and different ways that we can make it accessible and have made it accessible. And so I just think those are great things to have in our toolbox. So I'll see how that's being addressed in this plan. Yeah, so that's a great question.
And it's probably that a lot of these tools are going to be there to stay. Not that kids are going to stay home, but a lot of the maybe optional curriculum or any other things, or maybe as a supplement for what they do in class, there will be the online component of it. So I think that's going to be here to stay.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I can certainly make a note of that to the committee. Okay, was there any other questions or comments on this? And again, it's, you know, by no means is this conversation shut down. You can certainly feel free to send in any questions or comments that you have, and we'll bring those back to the committee so that they can complete this review. Good? Okay. So we will move now to 8.1, so superintendent's report. Camillo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, let me get this. My final report for the school year. I will try and spend more time at the end of my report to update SEAC on our summer learning program, which is quite extensive and very new, but I'll speak to that at the end of my report. So to begin with, we're really proud that we offered 3 sessions of how to use read and write, a beginner, an intermediate, and advanced session. All 3 levels were filled to capacity of 50 participants. We had a variety of staff, CERT, psychology staff, teachers, and so we're going to run all 3 sessions again on June 17th and 18th. The board staff, with the support of Stephanie Ballo, our superintendent, with the portfolio of medical conditions and health and safety, as well as Ryan Merrick, our superintendent of facilities, developed a return of equipment process for parents. From our perspective, we used that process for a communication on how to return CE equipment from parents back into our schools. I want to assure SEAC that any students in our system, whether they be special needs students or whether they be students not with special needs and not requiring special education supports, any students that are going to be utilizing summer learning programs of any kind or taking part in summer learning programs of any kind do not need to return their their specialized equipment, computer equipment, or any other type of equipment they've been using for their distance learning purposes. So they will keep that equipment until September. We continue to hold our IPRCs for all of our regional classes. Again, I'm very happy to share with you all that all of our external psych ed, SLP, and medical reports have come into our psych and speech departments now, and they're being reviewed and reported back to our school staff for our next steps. We've had all our transition meetings in support of all groups, and they've all been completed. And then finally, from our social work and mental health perspective, we have a number of social work files currently opened, and the emerging themes that continue to that are emerging from these files is being prepared to address COVID when we come back in September, and anti-Black racism as well, and the impact that this is having on our students and parents. And now I do want to now spend some time around our summer learning and summer mental health programs. We're really proud to share that we've put a lot of work into this. And I think I shared with you at our last SEAC meeting that throughout the past month, the ministry had been alluding to providing funding to school boards to support special education needs and mental health supports during this upcoming summer because of the disruption to learning because of COVID. In the early days, there wasn't a lot of detail and not a lot of direction. Just it was referenced that there would be supports in place. On Friday, May the 29th, we finally received from the ministries details with regards to financial supports for the boards, for all boards to support students with special education needs and summer learning programs, as well as to support mental health needs. And finally, funding with regard to transition programs at the end of August to support students in coming back in September. I do want to take this opportunity to thank our entire leadership team for really reimagining what summer school could look like, creating these new processes and programs. And for us in special education, we've really never had a special education support system in place for summer school. So this is all brand new. And we went from really essentially having nothing to creating an entire summer school special education classes, a CERT deployment, EA deployment, our mental health deployment, a new mental health informed consent process. All of this has taken place since May 29th. And so this is essentially our plan. Our social work and CYCs will be providing continuous support to existing and emergent cases throughout the summer for the entire 8-9 weeks of the summer, as well as offering support to summer school students and transition supports for the final 2 weeks before the return to school. So we will be employing at any one time during the summer 4 social workers and 4 CYCs for this work. For the first time in our board's history, we'll be hiring CERTs who will provide support to our existing secondary summer school programs and elementary literacy and numeracy programs. We're also going to be hiring a large number of our EAs to provide supports as needed to elementary literacy and numeracy programs, as well as our newly created summer special education programs. So let me talk about our special education summer programs. These are dedicated summer schools education programs that will run from July 13th to the 24th for 2 weeks, and from August 17th to the 28th, the final 2 weeks of the summer. The programs are designed for students who would benefit from additional functional literacy, functional numeracy, social skills, and communication skills. Classes will run for synchronous time for 2 hours per day in a synchronous virtual face-to-face online. We have currently planned for 1 elementary community living program for our medically fragile students with complex needs. We have currently planned for 2 elementary structured teaching programs. Those are students with developmental disabilities identifications, and could also include students with ASD, as well as to the DD identification. We've created 2 elementary essential skills classes, and those would serve our students with mild intellectual disabilities, language impairment, or severe learning disabilities. And we've also created 2 secondary life skills special education summer school programs for our students in secondary life skills classes. All of these classes will be taught by special education teachers. They may include a speech and language pathologist. They will definitely have educational assistance in supporting that virtual synchronous type learning, and may include a behavior analyst as well. The expectations for families and for students is that the child will be able to participate for 2 hours of synchronous learning every single day. That if the child is not able to participate independently, the expectation is parents must be available to support their learning. As I said, the synchronous learning will happen for 2 hours a day. It'll be from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And children can register for both programs. However, there are limited spots. And so students, if they register for only 1 2-week session rather than the July and the August session, it will open up more spots for more students. And our registrations will close on Monday, June the 22nd. We have notified, we've put these notifications on our board websites, so our parents are aware through board websites. We've also communicated to our schools to our principals and CERTs and our department heads. And we've asked them to reach out to families that they think would benefit, students that would have the ability, would have the capability, and would benefit from these programs. We've asked them to reach out to them to ask them to submit their interest. Once we get all of this interest, once we have all of our registrations, we will start creating classes with similar type learning styles in order to best meet the needs of our students this summer. So we're really excited about this. We're really proud of the work that we've been able to do in a very short period of time. And we also ask for a little bit of patience from SEAC and from all of our parents across the system, because this is brand new for us. We often talk about building the plane while we're flying it. We are building the plane, we're gassing the plane and flying it all at the same time. So I'm sure there's going to be a few hiccups along the way, but I do think long term this will really help support our students from a special education perspective, an academic perspective, and a mental health perspective in getting them back into September in whatever schooling will look like then, whether it be traditional, synchronous, distance, or some type of hybrid. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about my report or summer school learning and mental health, summer school mental health programming in particular.
Dan, thanks, Camilo. Dan, was your hand up for this?
It wasn't, but I was intended to have a comment. I think just a positive comment on the initiative. I think it is really going to make a difference with a lot of the special education students. So that's great kudos for, I guess, the staff that was working to put this together. And I think we'll have to look at the details right now and see how those are going to be worked out.
Thank you. In fact, one other interesting anecdote. When we started planning for this, we weren't sure. Really, we had many conversations about what kind of uptake would our parents be interested in after 3 months of virtual learning, on a computer. were they going to be just, you know what, we've had enough, you know, we want a summer break. We thought, okay, there was an argument to be made that we're going to have very little interest, and there was an argument to be made that, you know what, parents are going to be in great demand for this type of support because of the disruption to learning. Well, those of us that argued that there might not be a demand were wrong. The demand is shockingly large. In fact, Wendy, do you have those numbers? And I know that they're quite, you know, up to date, I think, to today. And if you can compare them to what we've heard from our summer school principals about compared to the past years to this year alone. And registration is not closed yet, and we'll continue to register for quite a while. So go ahead, Wendy.
So secondary school is up by 60% this year, and I believe as of last night, perhaps, we had 3,800 registrations for secondary school. That number's probably gone up today. It's open until the 24th, I believe. Our elementary grade 6, 7, and 8 numeracy and literacy programs were, I think, historically 500 or 600. We're up to over 1,400 today, and those ones are remaining open as well. So we're huge numbers, bigger than we've ever seen, and we're hoping that we can generate enough interest among staff to you know, support all those programs and sections, and as Camilla said, we'll be looking to provide CERT support as well. So Jody O'Reilly and I are working together with all of those groups to make sure that we're providing support in every possible way, as well as the rest of our leadership team too.
So just a quick comment, and probably to echo Dan's a little bit, and, you know, I'll be personal on it for a second. You know, so, you know, this is the first year that, you know, my son will be able to attend that Thomas Merton program. And, you know, I mean, Camilla knows this, and I've been very open about it. You know, this is a tremendous opportunity, and I'm so thankful that it exists. It's a perfect chance for him to do this remotely and to do this distance learning and to catch up on that gap. You know, he's going into grade 8. We're going to enroll him in grade 6. It just gives him a great chance to continue with the success that he's had. And, you know, for this to be made possible, I mean, hey, is this going to happen again next year? I hope so. Who knows? I'm going to revel in it while we have it. But I think it's pretty exciting. And I think it speaks volumes that we've been able to do things in a couple of different ways. So one, we've been able to allow or find a way for our spec ed students to participate in mainstream programming with supports. And then we've also been able to tailor some other programs for our life skills students or our structured teaching students. And so, you know, there's something for everybody. And the feedback that I'm getting has been resoundingly positive. And it's great. It's great to hear. And with so many camps being canceled and so many activities being canceled, especially for our special needs students, this is really a wonderful opportunity for them to keep engaged over this time. And I just had one quick question, Maria. I see your hands up, but I had a quick question for you, Camilla or Wendy, whoever wants to answer it. But I understand that and I think it's great that we've made both sessions for the special education program available. But I wonder if there's some consideration to be given on, you know, I'd like this to be equitable, and I'd love as many people to be able to participate as possible. Having said that, you know, I try to maximize every opportunity I can for my son, but, you know, is there some consideration to people enrolling in one or the other? And then if there is available space for them to enroll in a second, I just worry that someone's going to be able to benefit from both sessions and someone's not going to get any of those sessions. So I don't know how to handle that.
Sure, and that's an excellent question. Jen, you have your hand up. Is that to respond to this comment and question?
Yeah, I've been helping to work with the registration around this. So at the moment, to date, we have about 55 registrations for the specialized programs that we have. That's just as of minutes ago. I just had a quick look at it. Actually, a lot of people, the majority, are asking for both sessions. I think what we're going to need to do, because this is uncharted waters for us, we had no idea what our uptake was going to be. So we're going to go through, we have a plan to go through group students, place students. You know, we may not have a huge, maybe we only have enough for one class for life skills. Maybe we can use that extra teacher to create another class. So we're willing to play with the classes to be able to try to accommodate as many of the requests as we can. And then I think at the end of that, once we get through it all, we're not going to close registration until registration date is closed. So it won't be closed because of numbers. And then we'll have a look at everybody. And if we have to make some of those phone calls, that's something that we can, you know, discuss and look at that time. But we want to try to give everybody the opportunity to enroll in all of the programs that they may want at this time. So we're just going to keep an eye on numbers, and we're hoping for the best right now. Awesome. And we know we have some flexibility in there about moving people around. So
great. Hey, if you can do it, I say everybody register it. But that's great, as long as you have a mechanism, you know, for you know, recognizing that there might be some families that just, you know, don't, you know, want to get into one but can't because they're full. So that is fantastic. Maria, did you want to comment on this? I feel like I'm monopolizing this conversation. Uh-oh, did we lose you, Maria?
Sorry. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I think I clicked too many times and I probably muted myself.
Okay.
My kids laugh at my lack of technical skill all the time. So I guess maybe a couple of comments, a couple quick questions. But yeah, I think this is amazing that this is happening, and kudos to the staff putting this together so quickly, and something so unprecedented that wasn't expected with everything else that they're dealing with. And maybe I always think, you know, these challenging times bring opportunities, and there's probably going to be a lot of things that change in our world after COVID, and some of them are going to be for the good. And maybe this is something that will continue to happen in the summers, which would be, I think, great. I'm not surprised that there's more interest in summer school this year personally. And I'm assuming the numbers that Wendy gave earlier were overall, like for the secondary and the 6, 7, 8, because those sound like big numbers for spec ed. Yeah. So the one question that I had, and Wendy didn't give any numbers for this, but I was going to ask about this anyways. I know I had asked at the last meeting about the grade 8 reach ahead, and I did hear in the board meeting that the board's going ahead with that. And I'm wondering what the communication has been on that. Has that gone out to grade 8 parents? Because they wouldn't be aware. And someone told me where that information was found on the board website, but I would never have found it. If even looking for it, I don't think I would have known where to look. And I don't think that's something parents would even be aware. So I'm just wondering what the communication is on that, because we're running out of time, I think, for parents to get in on that if they're interested. So
thank you. So the question, just to be clear, Maria, you're asking, have we communicated to grade 8 parents of gifted students that the ability to reach ahead is there? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I guess yes, and also all grade 8 parents, because I think it could be a benefit. I mean, I see it as, you know, it's a great thing to have available anyway, but I think particularly in this environment, because I know those summer school courses are more, they're designed to be delivered in a virtual environment, like in an online environment, etc. And so kids have had kind of this lack of structure for the last few months. So I think and that might be one of the reasons too why summer school is more popular this year. You know, here's an opportunity to continue learning, and in a more structured environment that's actually intended to be delivered that way, and that maybe that helps bridge the gap for September. So I am asking about all grade 8 parents, but certainly I could see this being of interest to some grade 8 gifted students as well. So yeah, I'm just wondering what the communication's been.
I know we have Pat Daly on the line. I know that Pat, you and I have talked about kind of that communication. Again, with respect to just that general communication to all grade 8s, I can't really speak to that about whether that's going to be communicated to all grade 8s. Pat, are you aware of any communication that'll be going out to grade 8 parents regarding the reach ahead ability?
Thanks, Camilo. Well, I do know when I was reading the St. Gabe weekly update last night that they send out, it was front and center on theirs. It's certainly front and center on the Merton website. I know in speaking with Superintendent McGillicuddy last week that our Pathways itinerants are still doing work with all of their schools. So that information would have been translated back to grade 8 teachers. That's really all I can speak to at this time. And I'm not sure how many kids actually have registered for that specific program.
Thanks, Pat.
So could I just follow up on that? It sounds like maybe that the communication on that's been sporadic. So can we maybe look at having something more streamlined to make sure that all parents are aware of that in time to register? And then I just had a question as well about the life skills classes, because I just texted someone that I know that I thought might be interested in that, a parent, and they weren't aware. So how did that information, it sounds, you're obviously got people registering, so I'm just wondering how that information was supposed to go out to life skills parents.
So we, as I said earlier, we posted all of these this information on the board's website on its main page. We're also asking our CERTs in our schools, our department heads in our high schools, to reach out to families that they think would benefit, would be available to support their child in this type of virtual synchronous online summer program. So it is, you know, those are the two main ways that we're communicating this information out to families right now.
Okay. We good on that? Okay. Thanks so much, Camilo. Thanks everybody for the information on that. It's a great good news story. So I think it's fantastic. Oh, and Wendy just said Reach Ahead is easy to find. Sorry, on the Merton website. Okay. Trustee report. Are you still with us, Trustee Guzzo? Uh-oh. No, let me just check. Oh, Maria, yeah, question?
Sorry, I just want to follow up
sure.
about you know, how this information is getting to parents, because I know Camilla said the life skills is on the website, and Wendy mentioned that the Reach Ahead is on the easily found on the Thomas Merton website. But I guess again, the point I just want to make is, like, parents, they're not going to go looking for it. They don't know it's there, right? So unless they happen to stumble across it, if they're not hearing from the CERTs, you know, it's not necessarily making its way to the people who might be interested. So I would like to suggest maybe a more intentional communication strategy to make sure that everyone who might be interested in a life skills class or a Reach Ahead credit or any of these opportunities, that they are available, that they are made aware. So I'll just leave that comment.
Okay, thanks, Maria. I don't see Trustee Guzzo on the line. So I'm not sure if she has had to drop off, but we're due for the trustee report. Trustee Carabella, do you want to pitch hit? So I guess I put you on the spot there, I bet.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I am put on the spot. I wasn't ready for that. Can it maybe go to the next topic and I'll just see?
Yeah, we're almost done. So the last topic we have is SEAC discussion. And I wanted to bring up that we have two SEAC members, Maria and Paul, for the RFP committee for school uniforms. And that information has been sent to Jeff Crowell and Aaron Lofts. If there was anybody interested, please let myself or Andrea know as soon as possible. And our next agenda is next meeting is September the 28th, 2020, which seems unreal. What else can I put in here? Oh, sorry, hold on. Yeah, Maria, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with this unmuting today. Just a quick comment that I think everyone would have seen the email that came out from the board about the ministry's consultation about the return to school in September. So I would just encourage everyone, if they can, to send in any feedback they might have, because that's going to be a challenging time and we don't even know what that looks like yet. I know the ministry's looking at different possible scenarios. So I think any feedback that people have, they want to share directly with the ministry, I would just encourage everyone to do that.
I agree.
Hopefully they're
Jump on it.
listening.
Yep. Yeah. We actually have open ears. I know I sent mine in, so I agree with you.
Yeah.
That's a good.
That's it.
That's a good point. Thanks.
I don't know
Mike.
if I bought Helena enough time there. Sorry.
I mean, I could pitch hit, but I feel like I've done enough talking tonight. I can also comment that this will be Wendy Reed Purcell's last SEAC meeting with us. Wendy, are you there?
I am, Brenda. Thank you.
Like, I don't even know where to start. So I know we have a little bit of time, as far as when your official day will be, and I hope our paths cross, and I hope you come back for some special projects, and I hope it won't be the last time that we see you, but thanks so much for everything you have done. It's been awesome, and we're gonna miss you.
Thank you, Brenda. I've enjoyed it. It's been, this is my 40th plus SEAC meeting, I'm pretty sure.
You survived.
I did survive. I survived. It's been a real honor to be the coordinator of special education here in Halton Catholic. I'm very, very grateful for the experience. It'll be the highlight of my career for sure. And you're in such good hands with Jody O'Reilly and the rest of the team. So you'll be in good hands, and I hope if Jody lets me, and Camillo, I might like to get back to just a CERT meeting and a DH meeting, because it's hard not to say goodbye to people,
Absolutely.
In real time, and have a coffee with them and a hug if that's allowed by then. So anyway, thank you, Brenda, for the kind words, and I wish you all the best.
And you can come to our first SEAC meeting. You don't need their permission.
Okay.
But we have been blessed to have you. I don't know why my screen went all weird. Maybe that's like a sign. We have been blessed to have you. And again, from a SEAC perspective and a spec ed perspective, I know that Camilla will be crying a few tears in his beer. But yes, I think we're in very good hands with Jody and the rest of the team. But we just wanted to officially say thank you, and you will be missed.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Helena, did I give you enough time?
Hello. Okay,
Hello.
I'll try.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, I just went, so I can say that tomorrow we have our last board meeting, and we will be voting on Jean Vanier being renamed, and the name that's proposed is St. Francis Xavier. So that will probably become official tomorrow. So that's exciting for the Jean Vanier community. And thank you to Maria for mentioning about the consultation, and you as well, Brenda, from the ministry. That will be good for parents to fill in. Also, tomorrow's board meeting, we do have Pat Daly talking about school closures and September reopening. So I think we'll have a lot of questions and look forward to that report. And we just continue with some policies, delegation. That's all I can say for right now.
Yeah, no, that's great, Helena, and I appreciate you jumping in. And what I can do is I can ask Trustee Guzzo to send a copy of her written report.
Oh, great. Yes,
to everybody, just, and not that you didn't do a great job pitching, and I'm trying to think of what else I could jump in there with, but those are the ones that I sort of had on my mind. But I will ask Nancy to follow up with a hard copy if there was anything that she wanted to share that wasn't mentioned.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Helena. So I think that is it. I need a resolution for absenteeism. So, oh, sorry, Pat Daly, hand up, yes.
Sorry,
no, not at all.
Madam Chair. I just wanted to say thanks very much to the entire group for your work with SEAC, and in particular, thank you for letting me sit in on the meetings. It's really valuable to me to get a sense of some of the concerns around our special needs population, and I do really enjoy the meetings. I know I don't say a whole lot at them, but it's been good learning for me. So thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Thanks for joining us, Pat. It's been great to have you and have your perspective on things and have you be able to pitch in. So thank you, Pat. I was gonna say you should probably get a couch in your office because you have a lot of late meetings. Dan, you have your hand up?
Just very quick, about the presentation for Erin Oak. Can we have a copy emailed, or is it on the website somewhere?
I'm sure Denise can share that. Would you be able to check on that, Camillo?
I sure can. Denise had to leave the meeting, but I will follow up with Denise. Yeah. And
Thank you so
Andrew
much.
says we have it. We can make sure we send it.
Yeah, Andrew says we can send it. Awesome.
Thanks a lot.
No problem at all. Okay, so I just need a motion for absenteeism. So resolve that Marvin, Yvonne, Tammy, Tracy, and Deborah have sent their regrets. So would I be able to get a motion for absenteeism?
I'll move that, Brenda. It's Rhonda.
Oh, thanks, Rhonda. And seconded?
I'll second it. It's Marika.
Thanks, Marika. Okay, and I need a motion to adjourn, but wait, I need to find my closing prayer. So if not, someone else has to lead us in prayer. Who has their closing prayer with them? I'm putting everyone on the spot tonight.
You are?
I know I am.
I don't have it.
Someone's got to have it. It's not in my little package here.
I can find it real fast. Want me to go?
Or Andrea, do you have it? Thanks, Wendy. I see you're saying goodnight. Andrea, do you happen to have it?
I'm just looking for it too in my hard drive. Hold on.
I have this big thing.
Yeah, I don't have a hard copy. I'm just looking on my computer.
Okay. I don't know where it went.
Well, I have it here.
Oh, Dan. Okay, good. So I will do, if we can get a motion to adjourn, and then maybe I will ask you to lead us in prayer. So do I have a motion to adjourn? Anyone?
Moving to adjourn.
Dan, your motion to adjourn. Okay, seconded.
Oh.
Rhonda. Okay, Dan, do you want to lead us in the closing prayer?
Sure. In the name of Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Blessed are you, O God of all creation. Each day you spread before us the rich and wonderful diversity of the human family, created in the divine splendor of your love. Fashioned in your image, you call us to love one another with the same tender care which you brought us to creation. Each one of us is but one small part of the glory that is you. As we serve the students, families of the Halton Catholic District School Board on the Special Education Advisory Committee, fill us with your grace, guide us with your wisdom, and give us the strength and courage to do your work so that it may always be said of our every act, God saw that it was good. Amen.
Amen.
In the name of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Thank you, everybody. I know that was a long one. It was our last one for the before summer. We'll see you all in September. Keep up communications over email. Everybody's always an email away. And thanks everybody for a great school year.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Brenda. Thanks, everyone.